Hearthstone Global Games is an epic country versus country tournament where teams of 4 card slingers each clash for national pride. But in the end, the UK always wins.
Wait, everybody knows it's Germany always wins.
Aren't you Polish?
Is winning all that matters?
It's all about fun and getting along with your teammates.
That's easy when their skills are legendary.
Or in this case, you have an ace player who will never let you down.
So we're gonna see the same old archetypes then?
No, every team needs to bring all 9 classes.
So we're gonna see Hunter?
I wonder.
So let's recap. It's 4 regions, 48 countries, but
Only one winner. Get ready
for the Hearthstone
Global Games.
Hello everyone and welcome to Hearthstone Global Games. We're in week 4, day number 2. Hey, and I'm Raven. Joining me as always is Sottle to kick off the day where we have 6 matches coming up. We've got a lot of action kicking off today.
Yeah, extended day. We've got six series today that you can sit and see with sheer ease, so do not leave for a second. The action is extended today due to the unique scheduling challenges of having to have all these different countries from different time zones, different regions of the world, all playing each other at a comfortable time. It's just so happened that we need to get 6 of them done today, and that is just a treat for you guys.
Yeah, we've got some great matches coming up, but before we get into those, we can go over what the format looks like for Hearthstone Global Games. We are currently in Stage 1, as I mentioned, week 4 of a 10-week round robin, where there are 8 groups of 6 teams each. They're going to play each other once, and then the top cut will move on to Stage 2.
Thought you were about to go into it again then. 6 teams each compete for national prize. And then we move on to Stage 2 with the top cut of those round-robin groups going through to run it all back yet again. A 3-week truncated round-robin where the top teams will then advance into single elimination, the top 4 of which then get the honor and the privilege of competing in our live LAN finals.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome once we get to those finals as well. Being able to say, yeah, we're just the best country in the world at Hearthstone is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, we've already established that Complexity are the best team in Hearthstone, so now we need to figure out who the best country is.
Please.
I mean, proof's in the pudding, right? It happened. Come on.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think it was just happenstance.
Okay.
We'll see. I'm sure there'll be another one coming up soon. But we can check out the groups we did have yesterday play out as well, so there are additional matches on there. Kicking off with Group A, Sweden, who's going to be playing today, and they're going to be against Bulgaria a little bit later on. They're currently at the top with a 1-0 lead. Most of the rest of the group here is just very middling with 1-1 match record and even 5-4, 4-4 game scores as well. So definitely everything to play for in this group. But if Sweden win, they're going to put themselves very far ahead.
Yeah, and as we've started to see these weeks develop, most countries have now played 2 or in some cases even 3 times. We're seeing most of the groups take shape in some kind of recognizable form as we're seeing, who's on the verge of qualification, who's really struggling. But as you mentioned, Group A, everything up for grabs right now. And I think it's reflected by just the average power level of the group. A lot of these countries are just very, very evenly matched. Perhaps China and Sweden should be making a better run of it than they are. But Group B, speaking of making a great run of it, the USA 2-0, 6-1 in overall game score, putting this group to shame right now, Raven.
Yeah, this is one of the groups that is starting to shape up. We can see it. Romania at the bottom, led by, very well-known player in the form of RDU. Currently 0-2, and they're going to be coming up against United States a little bit later on as well. So we're going to see this group further take shape, as Netherlands yesterday did take a win over Thailand, which means they've, started just tracing the heels a little bit of United States. So I imagine Team Netherlands are going to be watching today's games with a great interest once it gets to Romania versus United States.
Yeah, going to be a massively important game in our 6th bonus game for the day, if you like. But again, another group where the cream has risen to the top. Russia would definitely be the favorites going into this group, just based on the lineup of world champions, seasonal champions, and everything else that they have playing for them. 2-0 again in match record, showing their dominance in this group. But maybe a little surprising that Australia are struggling as much as they are. They definitely do have a good scene going for them out there, and a couple of very well-known players representing them.
Yeah, I think what I will say is Australia actually, gave Russia a run for the money as well. Yesterday it was 3-2, quite a long series as well. So probably the closest. As you can see, the only 2 losses in game record Russia have had were to Australia over the course of 2 matches as well. So even a reasonable run for the money, but throughout the middle of the group, you see, the 1-0 from New Zealand. They've got another match coming up later on. And then we're going to move on to Group D, where we have Slovakia at the top, currently 1-0. This group not had as many matches being played out, but the talking point, as you brought up yesterday as well, Greece being 0-2 down. If they go 0-3, that's pretty much... I don't think it's 100% certain.
No, it can happen.
It's not 100%, but pretty much you're in a very, very rough spot to try and even get out of this group.
Right, and they have their shot today, and even though they have that 0-2 record, their confidence remains unabashed. They have been one of the more vocal teams so far in terms of, bigging up their chances, talking down their opponents in some cases as well, and that has continued. Like a boss, I believe, tweeted that he didn't need to prepare for this game, so he was just playing another game instead. He wasn't even practicing Hearthstone this morning. Yeah.
Well, that's either going to look really cool or backfire quite a lot. So,
yeah.
Brave man indeed. Group E, Italy at the top 2-0. We saw them play yesterday. We had a chance to talk to them after the game as well. And, they seem really confident. The Italian team built up of the top HCT point earners in the country anyway, that also happen to be on the same team together outside of global games.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial point and one of the big reasons why Italy are being so successful. We asked them about it when we interviewed them, said, do you think this is a benefit to you that you're so used to working together? You still
probably walking if they're going to the shop or something.
Yeah, little trip down the shops, get a nice refreshing beverage, and then back to practice, because that is the point. They are just well used and already share opinions on what good tournament lineups are, what are the right tech cards, what is the strategy for coming in and being successful in a tournament format. And as you can see from Group E, massive success for them so far.
Yeah, and as we move on to Group F, some really showstoppers coming out here. Canada 2-0 with a 6-0 record, the best in the season so far. And then Malaysia 2-0 as well. We saw them play yesterday against Belgium and take the win, so they're already looking great. Denmark 1-0, France 0-1. So they've still got some more matches to play to catch up, so to speak, with the rest of the group. And don't worry, like we mentioned at the start, the scheduling is something that we try to manage quite well in Hearthstone Global Games to ensure the players that are not playing at 2 in the morning for their time zone. So we fit the matches in as and when we can, and by the end of it, all the matches will have been played out. No one gets to play more or less than any other team.
Yeah, Canada, I believe, the only country to have played more than one game to still have that absolutely perfect game score record. So huge achievement for them so far, sitting pretty in Group F. But Group G, it's Turkey, perhaps one of the surprise packages so far, who have risen to dominance here. And the rest of the group still much of a muchness. Everyone hanging around that 1-1 record and a couple of 0-1s. But Turkey really have taken the bull by the horns in this group and really headed out front with a 2-0 record. And I feel like Group G in particular was a group that was crying out for someone to do that. If you look at all these countries, they're all very, very accomplished in their own right, but there's none of the big superstar teams in this group, which means someone who could get off to an early lead like Turkey have done really put themselves in prime position for qualification.
Yeah, I think Taiwan is the screaming out to me here team, because they have a lot of great players, but they're at 1-1, so it doesn't matter how good your team looks, it matters how well they perform. Sure. So, quite rightly, Turkey looking fantastic. And speaking of teams looking fantastic, Ukraine played yesterday, and wow, just put on another great showing. 3-0 so far in match record. They're probably looking at 9-2 in game record here, so they're probably looking at feeling pretty comfortable about making it out of the group. And then we've got Czech Republic, who are going to be going up against Belarus later on today as well. And then Philippines were the team that, was on the receiving end of Ukraine's, nice performance yesterday. So they're currently 1-2 in groups. And then Germany and Croatia 0-2. Big talking point there for Germany.
Yeah, Belarus yet to enter the fray just yet, so we will see the first outing for the Belarusians. Very excited to see that. Not a country that is on my radar as a Hearthstone nation, or too much as just a country in general. The only thing I know about Belarus is Alexander Hleb, because I'm unfortunately an Arsenal fan, so I have memories of good old Alex before he departed us for Barcelona. But that is about as far as my knowledge goes, apart from about their geographical location and their population. That's about all I could find on Belarus. So looking forward to them writing their own stories within Hearthstone today.
Yeah, we'll get to see what they can do on the old Hearthstone board. We can check out the schedule as well, what we've got coming up for everyone today. We're going to be kicking off today with Israel versus Norway. And then we're going to have France versus Kazakhstan to see if France can start to, continue battling with the top portion of that group, with Canada in there as well. And if Kazakhstan can start to get a win on the board, because they're currently 0-2 in groups, which is looking pretty rough for them.
It's true, but Israel versus Norway, the game that we do have coming up first, is one that I'm very excited for. And then, as I mentioned, Belarus entering the fray against Czech Republic with a 2-0 record. So, tough test right out the gate for Belarus. Bulgaria taking on Sweden. Of course, Sweden, definitely a real powerhouse, represented essentially by the entirety of Team Alliance on their roster. Greece, perhaps the big underperformers, as we mentioned, going up against Portugal in the game that they are very comfortable with. And then would it be unfair to call Game 6 our main event, Raven?
I think we call it Raven's bonus round.
Okay, fair enough.
Is the official title for the 6th match that we have. Is going to be Romania versus United States. And, as you said, this could be the sort of, the main event of today, so to speak, for multiple reasons.
Yes.
One, USA and Romania have some superstar players on their teams,
Yes.
which just makes for a great match.
Check.
Also, USA are at the top of the group, Romania at the very bottom of the group. Both teams really need this win. One, Romania to stay within, sort of able to battle for even qualifying out of the group. And also USA to cement their dominance in that group so far. Stay at the top and almost guarantee going through either, first, second, or third in the group.
Yeah, the fortunes honestly couldn't be much different for these two teams, and the stakes that are on the line couldn't be that much higher either. I mean, USA is basically a winning in-game.
Yeah.
3-0, almost job done at that point. You could slip all the way back down. You're probably still going to sneak into a third place. But for Romania, they are right on the precipice of where one more defeat, as you said, isn't mathematically over at that point, but you are asking for big favors off the rest of the group to really all take wins off each other so that you can then climb back into probably just that third spot.
Yeah, for Romania, it doesn't sound as good, but win and not out is...
Just doesn't rhyme.
No, well,
just not bars.
True, though. It's true. We can check out the first match, though, we've got coming up today. Is going to be, of course, Israel versus Norway. Norway, a lot of faces we've seen before as well. Zorkthar, Hunterace, Diggen, and Zyrez. We've talked a lot about this team in general. Zyrez, pretty much master deck builder. Diggen with his HCT performance as well. Hunterace, one of the new, younger kids on the block, so to speak, but, definitely a strong performer. And Zorkthar, always sort of that steady player on the team as well.
Yeah, in Israel, we did see one performance from them so far where they lost to Japan, but not in spectacular fashion. And Japan themselves are a very strong country, represented by a lot of well-known players that if you've been following, for example, the HCT Asia-Pacific events, then you will have seen and been exposed to a lot of these Japanese players. Israel acquitted themselves very nicely in that game, but of course that all counts for nothing if you don't get the win on the board. And Norway now with a 1-1 record are going to be another tough test for Israel.
Yeah, and in the country counter we've got going of who's been where. Have you been to Israel?
I have not been to Israel.
Yes.
I have, however, been to Norway.
We've already counted that one
Okay,
week one,
all right,
okay? I think it was week one, so you're not allowed that twice. We can't count it, but, both countries look absolutely fantastic, of course. That's a very nice shot, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Scandinavia in general, is one of the most beautiful regions of the world. It's quite easy to get some glamour shots of countries and make them look very nice just in some stock footage. If you want a clue to how things can be misleading, just look at the footage of the UK. It's really not that nice as what we've got. But Scandinavia,
I mean, North's fine, mate. I think it's just the south that's kind of rough.
Scandinavia genuinely is a beautiful region of the world and one of my favorite places to visit. So
yeah, and we can check out the matchup and see. We've talked a lot about this in terms of strategy and how it evolves throughout the course of Hearthstone Global Games, as this is a brand new format. It's a team format, team best of 5. First team to get 3 wins takes the match, and each player can pick 2 classes, then they select one to play essentially a best of 1 against the opponent opposite them on the graphic. So, I think we've decided a lot of this comes down to class pairings as opposed to specific deck choices or, ordering of classes in terms of when you play them first, second, third, fourth, fifth, potentially, but a lot of it is pairings. As we can see, Jonathan with, Paladin Warlock, and I think Warlock is the big talking point here.
It is, yeah. Warlock is one of the problem children of the format right now. There isn't really a very successful Warlock deck out there, so your decision is really whether you choose to try and hide Warlock in perhaps the 4th match or the Ace match, which might not have to happen. That way you can get away without, losing the advantage of having 2 real classes available to you. Or you can do what we're seeing Jonathan do, or what we saw Kalento do yesterday, which is just pair it with Paladin and say, you know what, whatever 2 classes I come up against, I'm pretty happy doing as you see here and picking Paladin. That does give a slight advantage over to Norway, though, who can then look at that and say, okay, we have Priest and or Druid up against Paladin. That's what's going to happen. Which of our two decks would we rather play?
And very importantly, we saw Tyler yesterday take a very close win against Paladin with Jade Druid as well, because Paladin might have the big clears, potentially. They might have some pressure. But the second Jade can start getting those Jade Idols and such rolling, then they can just kind of outlast any opponent. That's the nature of the deck.
They can, yeah. As we now see some shots like Israel are back together again in one location, but just to get the housekeeping out of the way, I know some of you will probably have got the message by now, but we still get the questions every week. This is not a 3-on-1 situation. Hunter Ace will be communicating with it. Oh, 4-on-1. An extra one just popped up out of the corner. Hunter Ace will be communicating with his teammates over communications. All countries do have the option available to them to travel and play in the same place, but if they choose not to do that, then they will of course be communicating with each other.
Yeah, and most importantly out of those shots, I didn't catch exactly which play it was, but one of the Israel players is actually wearing a really cool hat. So we'll have to check that out once we move forward.
Good talk. Thanks.
It's a cool hat.
Hunter Ace, though, as we've mentioned, I think we might see this when the player facts come up, but Hunter Ace is one of the elite group of Hearthstone prodigies as they've become known.
Feels like you're just quoting the exact fact that's going to come up.
That's pretty much what it says, yeah. But, you know, 16 years old as well, I believe, and there is a very illustrious group of 16-year-olds who have acquitted themselves very, very nicely. Hunter Ace probably needs to put a bit more work in, get a few more results before we can really put him in the category with the likes of George C. and Amnesiac, but that is, you know, those are the goals that he is aiming for at the very least.
Yeah, there's George C. and that other guy, isn't it?
Something like that,
yeah. But this matchup's going to be very interesting depending on what this Druid deck is, and it's something, you know, we kind of talk about every single time where, and this seems to be a lot of classes nowadays, where every class isn't just, oh, you'll be playing this. It's, okay, it could be Aggro Druid, it could be Jade Druid, it could even be some, you know, slightly different forms of styles of Aggro Druid. Is it heavier Murlocs? Does it contain Finger? You know, it's just all these questions that actually get thrown up in the air, and all those, whereas, you know, Israel is like, I'm just playing Paladin. Just going to get them. Paladin has a lot of options as well, but they don't really have much choice.
It's true. I mean, they are stuck with the one deck that they have, but if anything, Paladin has more variation to it than the Druid does. And you mentioned the Jade Druid versus Paladin matchup that we saw yesterday. Yes, Tyler was just about able to get over the line with the Jade Druid, but just about is the key
it was
phrase
close.
there.
Yeah, 100%.
There was a serious early beatdown going on from the aggressive start from the Murlocs coming out from the Paladin, but it's not going to be the Jade Druid. It's going to be the Aggro Druid. So this is going to be a matchup that will live or die by the fight for early board control between turns 1 or 3. We do see that Israel are packing Consecration in the Paladin, so they do have some comeback potential, but if you can force Consecrate in a situation where you're just happy to reload as the Druid, you're perfectly happy for that to happen. The real big battle happens turns 1 to 3 and who can grip the board.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as well. We saw the Consecrate get mulliganed away because they don't know which Druid it is. But, you know, if you had this heads up somehow, you probably, especially on the coin, keep the Consecrate, try and clear the board out if there are no buffs or with the help of early minions. Keep the Consecrate, try and clear the Druid board out once, and then hope you can then just overpower the board by sticking on it. But you just don't have that information. If it's Jade Druid, the Consecrate is pretty much pointless.
Yeah, the problem is, even against Aggro Druid, like, Consecration is great exactly in the situation where you have it in your hand and you need it, but there is, there's kind of a mental trap to it, because actually a lot of the time, Consecration doesn't get work done if you lose the board early. Yeah. The majority of early minions from the Aggro Druid is 2 health. And then, great, that seems great. I'm just going to consecrate that board, right? That works perfectly. Well, the idea is that they have AoE board buffs, which then immediately bring them up to 3. Then your consecrate just isn't getting any work done unless you can also stick some minions to the board. And keeping a consecration is not going to help you stick minions to the board in the first place.
Yeah, there was the Valfrid Inquisitor was kept in the hand, and now there's another one as well. So there's two minions that maybe don't look too threatening, but the fact that they have 3 health means that they can, like, at least maybe chip away, make the health on the Druid's minions more manageable for potentially future consecrates, or, you know, just to trade off, make them not really run away with the power level. Because the problem with Druid is that they buff once and you're like, okay, you know, manageable. Then they buff again and you're like, oh no, these are all just, you know, that one step too big to be able to deal with even remotely efficiently.
But this kind of situation is exactly where you see the ability of a fast hero power really coming into play. It really forces the coin double one here, because a hero power like Druids that can affect the board means that a 1-3 against a 2-2 is not a good situation for you. You know, you really give the option to Hunter Ace and to Norway to just hero power if they would like to, or continue to develop if they find that superior. Now Patches picked up alongside a Mark of the Lotus. Mark of the Lotus is definitely one of the key early game cards that you do need to have success with Aggro Druid, and it's going to enable a couple of favorable trades here, if not this turn, then over the coming turns. But the fact that Patches was drawn and can't just be ripped out for free with that Bloodsail Corsair essentially means that Norway is down a 2-3 on the board this turn.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Also, the fact that, you know, Hunter Ace does have the option here of playing, for example, 2 of the 1-drops, not playing the Mark of Lotus, and still, because of the one of them being Firefly, you know, gives you the 1-2 back in hand again. Then you can play the other 2 1-drops that you'll have and Mark of the Lotus next turn if required. But you've got to think about whether you need to start making these trades on the board this turn.
Exactly, because if you were to just develop 2 individual 1-drops this turn, you leave your 2-2 sat on the board, there's 2 1-3s that trade into it, and then you've just kind of created weird board tension in a way that you actually struggle to break. Yeah. So I think Mark of the Lotus for the value trade this turn is just a matter of necessity here. This way you create no reasonable trade on the board for this Vilefin Inquisitor unless exactly Mr. Rockpool Hunter is picked up, which is a very, very fortunate draw for Israel here. But I do like this play from Norway. I think this is the correct way to go about this struggle for early board control, but they have been, I hesitate to use the word punished, but can count themselves a little unfortunate with that top deck Rockpool Hunter.
Yeah, and you can see how vicious these battles are over the course of the first 3 turns as well. You know, if that Rockpool Hunter wasn't drawn, and suddenly Norway in a much better spot. Like, just 1 card difference changes absolutely everything here. Allows the trades to look a lot more nicer. And Stampeding Kodo along with Finja pretty much just going to, you know, deal with the late game to a large extent. Finja mainly, as long as Israel doesn't get completely run over here.
Yeah, the equality in hand is a bit of a brick for now, but Kodo gives us some sort of indication that this is a more late game list, looking to use most likely Curator to refill on resources in the late game. So because they have just picked up 2 1-drops and a 2-drop in terms of their early game over the first few turns, it means that Norway have not snowballed as successfully as they would like to do. And this is almost the dream scenario here. Like, turn 3 is a big whiff for them, but by mulliganing away the consecration, it actually allowed them to fight for the board from turn 1 or 2 by picking up more early game minions. And now they're just hitting the consecration in more than enough time to be able to react to a board state from Norway.
Yeah, the Bloodsail Corsair in hand for Norway here as well. How long versus Paladin, you know, is it really reasonable to hold on to as well? Because there is the True Silver Champions, more than likely, and then a potential Tyrion with Ashbringer. But you are the aggressive deck here, so you do need to try and pile on pressure as well.
Yeah, I don't think you're ever thinking about Ashbringer with Bloodsail Corsair, but killing the second charge of True Silver is such a huge tempo swing. When they've paid 4 mana essentially for a heroic strike that healed you a bit, like, that's not great for them whatsoever. So Bloodsail Corsair, it's actually one of the most effective matchups for it, for its intended purpose as the card design, right? It's weird to say its intended purpose now, because now its intended purpose is just to get Patches on the board. That's kind of where we are as a meta as aggro decks, but Bloodsail Corsair being used as weapon destruction in this matchup perhaps more than any is just super valuable.
Yeah, and also, you know, the benefit of Corsair is it's a 1-2, especially in this deck, but then with a 1-1 buff, 2-3 is a very nice shape and awkward to deal with. Second Rockpool coming out for Yunatan here, and it's this is the joy of this Vilefin Inquisitors early on. Is it? Well, there's a Murloc. You know, you just press 2 mana, create a Murloc, then you can buff it. Seems good to me. And Israel already, or continuing, should I say, to still fight for the board. Next turn is Finja, and this could really flip the game on its head based on what sort of depth of Murlocs Israel have in the deck, because this varies very, very dramatically in these Paladin lists. I've seen everything from the to the extent that I don't remember the name of the card, the 2-1 that creates a 1-1 Murloc. Is it Murloc Raider or something?
No, Murloc Raider is just the 1 mana 2-1.
You know, the 2 mana 2-1 that creates
a
1-1. So see, you can't remember as well, so it's fine.
I can't.
But you know, I've seen lists with that in it. And then you go all the way to the other side where it's, you know, the Rock Pools, War Leaders, Blue Girls, Finja,
Right.
you know, and just a very tight Murloc package to get that Finja value very directly.
Yeah, we saw Amnesiac and quite a few of the other North American players running that list in DreamHack Austin, where it was the Steward of Darkshire, I believe, for like the 1/1 Divine Shield, the 1 health Divine Shield buff, and then just those extra minions because they have 1 health, providing that excellent synergy. And of course, when you are sticking your 1/1 minions to the board with the help of Steward of Darkshire, that just helps you land War Leaders, it helps you land Gentle Megasaurs, etc., etc. But Israel, probably without that kind of tech, based on the list that we've seen, will still be feeling very comfortable about their hand, because not only do they have their own Finja, but say there was an opposing Finja coming down that turn from Norway as the aggro druid, they had Kodo in hand, and a way that the way the board was contested, they could just clear the other 2 minions and Kodo the Finja. That would pretty much have been game over. So they have just about everything in hand that they could want or need right now. Living Mana is a pickup for Norway that will give them hope, but the Consecration has been redrawn now after being mulliganed away to be able to probably just straight up put an end to this game now.
Yeah, this is going to be too much. A lot of the time, Living Mana is that step after your board gets cleared,
Yes.
right? Then it's, okay, board's cleared, but I have a board full of 2/2s, and they're actually pretty difficult to deal with. But because, as you said, United has actually managed to battle for the board early on, not needed the Consecrate till now. We are only on turn 6, to be fair, and now has the Consecrate available, means it's going to get a lot of value. 1 from this Finja, but 2 mainly from this Consecrate. 2 Hydrologists, okay.
It's just Tidehunter, by the way, isn't it? The 2/1 and the 1/1.
Murloc Tidehunter.
Yeah, because like Bilefin Tidehunter is the new version with the 1/1 taunt. Yeah.
There you go.
We got there eventually.
That's why Saul was quiet. He was just
It really was.
sifting through the library of his mind
Yeah.
to try and work out exactly what that Murloc was. Went to your mind palace.
Mind Palace for a while. There you go. I knew that was coming for some reason. I just have the reads on you now, Raven.
Damn it. I have to start thinking up of new material.
Meanwhile, there are several Murlocs on the board, and a Consecration just killed a whole bunch of Mana Tree Ants, which means Savage Roar into bottom right from Norway are going to give up game 1, a very quick game 1. Turn 6 lethal, essentially, if you want to call it that way, from Paladin. Sometimes you just get lethal by running the aggro deck out of stuff, and Aggro Druid is probably the most all-in aggro deck in the game. Would you agree with that? There's the hat. There is the hat. It's Pirate Hat. Is that could be a bait and switch. What if the Warrior deck is actually Taunt Warrior and they're just trying to bait and switch
Genius.
Pirates?
Genius. Could happen. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. But yeah, you know, look at that Paladin deck. You know, it's no wonder that, you know, players are just ignoring Warlock, putting Paladin with it, because the deck is so powerful. It just fought with Aggro Druid early game and then still had Stonehills, probably Tyrion, maybe not Ragnaros, but probably enough late game. Tyrion, for example,
Yep.
Megasaurs can still play the late game, but battle with a fully like hyper aggro deck as well. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and there's a very fine balance to building decks like that. And when you can identify a deck that doesn't just curve like that and that it mathematically checks out, this is one of the things we talked about this yesterday, I think, with Lorinda, about how Firebat was really one of the first people to start applying maths to Hearthstone, not just in terms of probability of things happening, but to building lineups and to building decks.
Yeah.
And he had spreadsheet not just for matchup charts, but for deck building as well. How many 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops, etc. do you need to draw a smooth curve? So when you can identify that situation, as that Paladin deck is, where you do draw a curve like that more often than not, that is one of the most powerful types of deck that you can ever get in Hearthstone.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the Paladin list nowadays can do absolutely anything. The next game we've got coming up is going to be Murray for Israel versus Zokthar with Norway. It's going to be Druid versus Warrior. Murray decided not to play the Warrior. Maybe a little bit afraid of the Shaman as well. Can be a bit of a pain in terms of if it was Taunt Warrior they had, then Shaman, we've seen a lot of Jade versions with the Elementals and Bloodlusts as well.
That's true.
And along with Hexes, suddenly your taunts don't... You drop in 1 taunt a turn. Shaman's probably one of the most well-equipped classes to deal with that kind of pressure.
It is, yeah. I think pure Elemental Shaman doesn't really have enough pressure to just get the job done against Taunt Warrior a lot of the time, but when you're starting to pack in all those Jades and the ridiculous value engine of the Spirit Echo as well as those decks classically play enough healing that they're not just going to get burned out by just Die Insect to face over and over again over 2 or 3 turns. So yeah, a Jade Shaman would definitely feel like it was well equipped to do well in that matchup, but it is in fact going to be the Warrior coming out from Norway's side. It's going to go up against the Druid from Israel. And if this is another aggro druid from Israel, that's not a matchup you want going up against the Taunt Warrior. However, if it's the other side of the coin and we're looking at Jade Druid, then they have just queued into their dream matchup.
Yeah, and it is! Okay, Jade Druid versus the Taunt Warrior. I mean, you've just got to feel good if you're Israel. The second you see that quest, this isn't the matchup where you throw the quest either. You actually need to try and kill them, even though it gets very, very difficult for the Jades.
Yeah, what's really strange about Quest Warrior is that many of its highest win rate matchups are matchups where you throw the quest away and don't use it. Very strange that the decks kind of come together like that. Like, the quest is almost like this weird afterthought that gives it a chance in the other matchups. But its place in the meta is, you know, beating up these aggro druids and pirate warriors and hunters depending on the builds.
Also, as well, you would just lose the mirror, right?
Exactly.
You know, like,
yeah.
it's one of those matchups.
Like, the quest is almost there as an afterthought to say, okay, I need this to at least have a chance to go with the late game decks, but I'm here as an aggro stopper. It's a very strange scenario, but Jade Idol into Wild Growth into Fandral Staghelm seems good. Got PNG for Israel right now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think you were either talking to Lorinda yesterday or maybe tweeting about it or something, but I think me and you actually do agree on something here where people dislike Jade decks, especially Jade Druid. I actually don't mind it as a deck because it does one job very, very well, and it doesn't really do anything else that well. So, yes, that job might be annoying and you just lose in matchups like this.
Yeah.
But that's just one deck that can do that one thing. Like, that's pretty reasonable compared to the power level of some of the other decks against the whole field, right?
I mean, I do also think that Jade Druid is insane right now.
It is strong.
I think it's incredibly strong. With the addition of Earthen Scales and Primordial Drake has given it such a good shot against aggressive decks as well, which used to be its problem. But yeah, I have no issue with it as, you know, just a factor in the meta, right? I think being able to consistently just on demand punish people for getting too greedy is a healthy thing to be around. So I have no issue with it from that front. The problem does probably come where there's just no downside to playing it.
Yeah.
When it's just very, very playable against aggro as well, then maybe that is an issue. But anyway, back to the matchup at hand. As you all well and know, this is the dream for any Jade Druid deck. That first Jade Idol has been played, so if the game is looking like it's going to go long, they're going to have to be a little bit careful with their second Jade Idol, just make sure they protect it. But with Fandral not able to be answered on the board, that is a charging 4/6 Druid of the Claw if they would like it on curve, or the Feral Rage possibility to gain some armor as well.
Yeah, I wonder how much you liking just Feral Rage into Hero Power here to just clean up the Tar Creeper very easily, clear off the Armor Smith, and then just forget about life for a second, because the Tar Creeper is one of those awkward minions. Is how and when do you actually kill it? Because when you do try and kill it, it is very awkward if you're not killing it with spells.
It's very true, and Druid of the Claw just doesn't really do much. I mean, yeah, it's a 5-mana 4/6 taunt. That's what Druid of the Claw is, but the dual Fandral effect of it having charge as well doesn't have a massive impact on this board.
Yeah.
So it might be worth just pushing yourself a little bit off curve with the Feral Rage, but then you have to ask yourself the question of, like, well, look at my hand. I play Druid of the Claw on 5, and then I have 2 3s available to myself on 6. Whereas if I get rid of one of those 3s right now, what am I doing on my 6-mana turn? My hand's a bit awkward.
Good old Jade Spirit Hero Power, Sol.
Sure.
Sometimes it's all you need. But yeah, you know, did go for the Druid of the Claw. Didn't really get a benefit from the charge effect, so to speak. But
apart from the art, which is just pretty awesome.
That is true.
Yeah.
It's very colourful.
Have you seen Shellshifter in Fandral form, by the way?
Oh, I've not actually.
It's pretty sweet.
Is it? What is it like?
Well,
describe it. Paint me a picture with your words, Cecil.
Describe taste of Shellshifter, POP. No, I literally just put Fandral in the deck for a couple of games just so I could see it and just to see if it was going to be any good, just to, you know, have a 5/5 stealthy taunt thing. It wasn't. I cut it immediately.
How much mana is that? 3?
4.
4. Yeah, one more mana to play Stranglethorn attack.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Like, as opposed to doing this setup from Fandral, like, yeah, I've got to get this working. But back to the game now, there is the double 3 option. Earthen Scales is available, and I kind of love this card. This card didn't look flashy in the, you know, when we first saw it. I didn't think too much of it at the time, but the more I play with it, the more I really like it, because there's the straightforward, you can gain lots of armor from a large Jade. You can also enable very good trades that just shouldn't happen, you know, and I think I like that the most about it. Yes, it's nice to gain, like, 12 armor from a Jade or something cool, but most importantly, you just get those extra trades, very Zoo-like, where it's just that extra point of damage that you shouldn't have, and then suddenly that just busts open the board. And something Jade Druid really needs.
And the fact that it's just so cheap makes it so flexible as well. Like, I've won games against Pirate Warrior with Jade Druid recently as well, where it's just Auctioneer plus Earthen Scales on 7. I drew a card, I gain 5 life, I get 5 armor, and have a 5/5 Auctioneer on the board. 5 is a very awkward number for Pirate Warrior to do to a minion, but they need to respect that Auctioneer. They can't just let you go off.
Well, if they Reaper it,
yeah,
you're like,
exactly,
great.
Right. So aside from Reaper, all their things do damage in chunks of 3s and 4s generally. So it's a very awkward thing for them to trade into, but they can't just ignore it and then let you go off with Feral Rages and Earthen Scales again in the future. So it's just such a cheap, flexible card, and the combination of this and the lack of Azure Drake as well have led to the fact that almost every Jade Druid list is now playing double Auctioneer as well, for that reason. You have these extra cheap 1-mana spells in Earthen Scales that have replaced Raven Idol, and you really do just need essentially that card draw with the lack of Azure Drake.
Raven named card going in, rotating out.
Hey, Enchanted Raven's still hanging around for a while.
For now.
Yeah.
I'm actually Medivh is in the set for quite a while, right?
Medivh the Raven? Where are you
a Raven
going
onto the board.
Oh, I see.
He's a Raven. He's a Raven staff and stuff. Atiesh is a Raven.
We're role-playing, aren't we? Let's stop.
Yep. Never. Double Earthen Scales. How common is this list in decks? Because a lot of the time I actually normally only see the one.
Double Earthen Scales? It's pretty common.
Yeah.
I think I'll
be honest, I've not like played the most up-to-date Jade decks, but probably a week or so ago.
What I treat as the baseline for a standard Jade Druid deck these days is the list that Mage put out. Mage's Jade Druid deck, if that makes any sense.
Mage Druid
yes,
deck.
The player named Mage, he had a Jade Druid list that he was at least top 2 legend with. I'm not sure if he hit rank 1 with it. Pretty sure he did.
I love that. Top 2.
Yeah, right.
Not first.
Not first. Yeah, first loser in legend. But it was double Earthen Scales. It was the one Tar Creeper. It had a Gluttonous Ooze in it as well. That was the list that I really started to see popping up. Maybe minus +1 tech card here and there. That's the list that I'm basing it off as standard. And as I mentioned, it was double Earthen Scales in that game. So.
What I like about this play with the Jade Spirit is, a lot of the time you look against Warrior and go, playing into Brawl, right? Don't want to play into Brawl. The Jades are 2-2. You probably just don't care at this point. The main thing that Murray and Team Israel will be worrying about here is, what are they drawing next? They want a Nourish. They want an Auctioneer. Something to cycle some cards, because Jade Druid, we've talked a lot about how favored it is. Ain't favored if you've got no cards, guys.
No, and this is exactly what I was talking about before, where you've lost Azure Drake. So that's the reason why double Auctioneer has now come into the deck alongside double Nourish. You now have essentially 4 card engines, because Nourish being 3 cards is essentially good enough to be treated as a card engine in itself, and then you just make sure you never run low on resources. But right now, going into an 8-mana turn, Israel's entire hand costs the princely sum of 1, and with only 2/2 Jades right now, it's not even like a pickup of a Jade Blossom or a Jade Spirit number 2, for example, would even be a worthwhile board presence. It's just not doing enough in terms of the Jade size right now.
Ozruk, Bog Creeper, and Mogushan Warden being the options here. Kind of a tough one, but I think Bog Creeper's they're just the overall best card. I don't think they're really in a point where they need to think about, well, they can't even... They could play the Mogushan with the coin, but is it really worth, it's not one of those moments where, we talk a lot about Public Defender. It's only 2 mana. Do you squeeze it in? And, well, with 2 cards in hand, the total cost is only 1 mana here for Israel, and this is looking rough. What's worse is Fandor's been alive forever. And he's currently 8,000 years old or something, and you've still not drawn Nourish in that time. Imagine Nourish. I mean, you just win.
Even Wrath, right, is a high impact draw with the amount of time that Nourish has been, that Fandral has been stuck on this board. So Israel have just been so unfortunate with the sequence of draws. They haven't been able to hit any significant Jade ramp. There's not been Jade Blossoms. There's been that one Jade Idol on turn 1, followed up by this single Jade Spirit now. They haven't hit Nourish. They haven't hit Auctioneer. They haven't hit any of the synergy cards to go along with Fandral while it's been stuck to the board the whole time.
It's bad Druid players.
Enough of this, Raven.
Well, you're supposed to draw Nourish by now.
If we start casting Discover Mage and I have to sit and listen to you say how every glyph has Pyroblast in it and Mana Worm's just automatically in your hand on turn 1.
They all sound like good plays to me, and if you're good, you'll get it.
We are going to come to blows.
Okay, I'm pretty confident if that's the case, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Stonehill's going to be cleaned up. Again, the board just looking steady for Israel still. They still have the board. It's still not the end of the world at the moment. But they are probably running out of a little bit of time here, as the resources for Zorkthor and Team Norway are still quite abundant in hand. And the Bog Creepers, again, kind of awkward to deal with, because suddenly this is a big guy where there's no big Jades to answer it with.
Yeah, they have now managed to successfully get a point of damage onto that Fandral, though. So there is the opportunity to execute it, but they've quite clearly seen that there is nothing going on in terms of Fandral synergy in the opponent's hands. So there's probably no great rush to be doing that. And yeah, Bog Creeper just seems perfectly reasonable here to just continue marching forward towards the quest and just continue to try and stall this board out for as long as you can.
Yeah, well, one thing on the other side of that point to think about is, oh, there we go, is because there's been nothing, do you kill it to ensure that nothing gets drawn to make the hand good again? Do you get what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's straightforward, but you get the point, right?
Yeah, I think there's an element of fallacy to that line of thinking. Like, if the cards aren't there, the cards aren't there. Like, if you can just make a better play and your downside to that is that you're playing around a top deck, that's probably wrong, right?
Sure.
So
if there was maybe one more mana float in so you could coin execute with the Bug Creeper, then
right.
yeah. But yeah, just slamming the Bug Creeper seemed to be worth, and suddenly now the Earthen Scales coming out to draw one card. Interesting enough, just going on the Tar Creeper to buff it up a little bit more. It will hit for 5 now. And then, yeah, going into Jade Blossom, another Innovate coming out now. So this is starting to get going, but maybe one more cheap spell Jade Idol would be fantastic. There is the Nourish. But now the board's good enough to brawl.
It is. Norway could choose. Israel could choose to play around some of that though by trading some of the damage in. How much do they have now? 2, 5, 7. Yeah, I mean they can just trade through the Bog Creeper if they want to, and this does play around the brawl. So
trading Fandral in though, interesting. I actually thought they would have left Fandral alive, traded the 2/2/2s in, and then maybe even the Tar Creeper.
That would have only been 7 with the hero power, right?
Just left the Tar Creeper and let Bug Creeper, go into it.
Okay. That would have been a bit weird. I mean, I
just mean like, because you have Nourish and Fandral on board, and the Fandral's not been cleared for ages. I don't know.
It's possible, but the Fandral was already injured, so it'd be a target for an execute if there was one anyway. And I think their big goal here is, A, let's not just get completely blown out by Brawl in a world where they can just keep a big minion on the board. And secondly, now we have an Auctioneer. Let's just protect this Auctioneer. That's a way more important card to have sitting around than Fandral at this point.
Nourish draw into Auctioneer.
Yeah.
5 mana, 4 cards.
There you go.
Seems reasonable. This Tar Creeper as well, looking a bit more hench at 4/5. The Earthen Scales buffing it up a little bit. That's something I think I hopefully will not be alone in this, but learn the hard way about Tar Creeper. Its base attack is what it is anyway, and it always gains the 3 on top of it.
Yes.
So I tried to outlaw Peacekeeper Tar Creeper once. Didn't try it again, as I learned very quickly that it actually just has 1 attack normally. So the +3 went outside of it anyway. Execute going to go on this Tar Creeper to help clear it up. The second Execute... Oh no, sorry. Sleep with the Fishes looks more reasonable. Saving the Execute for a big target like a Volcanic Drake. Every single time. Volcanic Drake. Primordial Drake, if needed, to clear it off later on.
Or, just a 9/9, 10/10, 11/11 Jade, like whatever it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
Like, Sleep with the Fishes, this is a 3/3 Jade on the board now, right? So Whirlwind Effect plus Sleep with the Fishes is only going to be really effective for 1 more Jade minion. So they might as well use the bad card in Sleep with the Fishes and keep the universally strong one in Execute hanging around. 6 out of 7 now, I believe, on the quest. I've kept count correctly. There it is. Look at that, on point. Boom.
Nice. You can count to 6.
Oh, it's compliment to production.
Oh, okay.
Point, responding to my call to arms to check the quest.
I thought you were like, on point, so I got
Counting
to 6.
to 6. Got him.
Wow, that wasn't even rehearsed. That was weird. Iron Blackpot going to come down and just going to help ramp up these Jades, something that Israel have been wanting to do for the whole game because, you were talking right now, 1 Taunt off the quest, which isn't in hand yet, and 11 armor, 28 health, under pretty much null pressure until the Aya came down. And suddenly the Dying Set Hero Power could have just won the game off the back very quickly, apart from this Aya being on the board. So Xocthar and Team Norway still very much in this game for now, but we can see that the Nourish draw is probably going to be huge for Murray and Team Israel here.
Yeah, and I feel like I quite often see this matchup develop like this, where maybe the start isn't as quick as it can be for the Druid. There's just a few turns of ramping, and then it's a sub-perfect curve that happens afterwards, right? Yeah. So it takes until turn 8, turn 9 for them to or their 8 and 9 mana turns, I should say, for them to really get started. In the meantime, Taunt Warrior can just develop a couple of few annoying minions, and that really stalls for a long time, and you start to think, maybe this matchup can just happen every now and again.
And then 6 Jades on the board,
right,
like, never mind.
Exactly.
There is still a Brawl, though. So the Brawl, Sulfuris Hero Power turn that we see so often from Taunt Warrior as the setup to then go forward and win the game, can happen. And even though it's equipped this turn, he's using it to kill off the 4/4 Jade, protect his board a little bit. And if it ever gets out of control, he can reduce the board down to 1 minion. That minion might be his own for a start. And even if it's not, for quite a while yet, it's still going to be a killable Jade with that hero power.
Yep, and you saw the slam happen, and taunt number 7 was picked up from the Ali Armorsmith. So now Norway have got their job done very quickly. And I talked about this before, but it almost feels like the Warrior quest was almost by design given to them as a nod to the fact that Control Warrior archetypes can't really outlast everything in the meta anymore. Yeah. There's too many cards that just, stuff that makes new stuff, discover effects. 3/3 hits the board and it puts a new card in your hand. A 2/2 hits the board and it puts another card in your hand. And then just on top of that, of course, the might and majesty of Jade Idol itself means that Control Warrior can't just go to fatigue against the majority of decks in the meta anymore. So they needed a hard win condition. And that's what they got in the form of Sulfuras in terms of Die Insect as the hero power. And they've got it done quick enough here that they might just be able to race Jade Druid down before it can completely take over this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, with the Brawl Execute as well in hand, that combo means that you can clear a board once, and maybe that is enough. We can see now some of the key cards, Jade Behemoth, Jade Idol in hand. So they're going to be, what, 5/5, 6/6 from those, and then 7/7 from Aya, or, they'll get to 5, 6, 7.
In whichever combination
yeah, it doesn't matter, but they'll get to 5, 6, 7 with the 3 cards he's got, and that might be enough. But with that one Brawl, there needs to be more Jades coming up very quickly to keep the pressure high, because if not, Druid cannot really deal with 8 damage a turn, especially when Feral Rage has already been used and Earthen Scales.
And that is a gargantuan draw for Norway here. The Curator being picked up just gives them all the gas they can possibly need. Hit the Matriarch as well by the benefit of having already played a Hatchling earlier. So 6/9 and the Primordial Drake in hand. Primordial Drake, even when the Jades are big, Primordial Drake is actually quite a strong card I've noticed in the mirror from playing the mirror match a few times. Because even if it doesn't kill some, 5/5 and 6/6 Jades on the board, it's still annoying. It still does that 2 damage and still forces multiple attacks to go into it. So it's such a great stalling mechanism in this position.
And in this matchup, it can actually just do that extra bit of damage, what makes the bigger Jades killable by Ragnar's hero power as well. So just that chip damage is really nice. But also, we talked about this yesterday as well, but Curator, I'm very quickly just believing it is the MVP in this deck.
It is.
Every single time we see it, it's like, does he have Curator? Did he play it? Probably in a good spot after that. No matter what happens in the game.
I can't remember the exact position, but it is very, very clearly top 5 win rate cards when played in the deck. Even kept in some matchups.
Even beats Brawl.
Yeah, that's why.
It's just so good.
Even kept in opening hand in some matchups, it had something like a 56, 57% win rate.
I can see it.
Yeah. Boom. Take 8, son.
Okay. I didn't think it just even queued the Curator attack there. I was like, look, it's good, but you still need to use it to attack. It's not that good. You just put it on the board and just its presence deals with most of it.
Ooh, this is a deviation from the mage list that I'm used to seeing. Burgly Bully, of course, just almost a direct replacement for Azure Drake in that it gives you delayed card draw. You get some coins, you then use those coins with your Auctioneer, and your 5-drop still essentially drawing you some cards every now and again. But
yeah, more of a stylistic choice because of these double Auctioneer lists we're seeing now. If you're running 2, the odds on you getting to a point where you can probably get at least 1 to 2 coins from this bully to then use with even the second one. A lot of the time we've seen Auctioneer be used at the very, very end of a Jade Druid game to just infinite cycle per turn the Jades.
That's the dream.
Which means that the coins are going to help do that, So we'll see how it turns out for Team Israel here, because this Jade Idol is, do you think it's going to have to be held on to? The Jades will be 8/8. I think.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah,
so 6 and 7 on the board last turn.
Yeah.
5 came out the Aya, right? And then 6 and 7 hit last turn, I think.
Yeah, so Israel cannot play this Jade, because if they just play it, that's the last card, and it gets hit by Rag Hero power, you're like, ooh. So they're looking like they're going to be trying to hold on.
Counter argument, you're just losing the board right now. You are just losing the board to just average, mediocre taunt minions. Maybe you do just need an 8/8 in board.
Already die, huh?
Cornered Sentry, Ravaging Ghoul, hero power this turn?
Yeah, it does fit in, doesn't it?
You've used 1 Sleep with the Fishes already. How good is your Ravaging Ghoul going to be for you?
It's true. Gonna save it. Still, do similar next turn.
Yeah.
And just the Matriarch's just an absolute beast.
True. This develops 6 power on board instead of the 5 that would come from the Sentry and the Ravaging Ghoul, so just gives a better shot at lethal. There is the 8-8 that we would have seen, and now surely there is a 9-9 hitting the board.
Yep.
And it's just lethal in
Shuffle.
play anyway. Yeah. There's just potential lethal on board here. They need to hero power up and not attack just to get out of range of that 4, hitting them in the face from the Curator, so they are right on the precipice right now. And you can see Ravaging Ghoul and Execute as Zorkthar proudly introduces us to his feline friend.
Yeah, even gave us a wave.
Hey, buddy. Sorry, you shouldn't have mentioned it. Now I'm instantly distracted.
I'll take over the rest of the casting of this long game we've got left. Because Sol does get distracted by cat. Zorkthar just throws the cat away in victory. That's what they do in Norway. They win by throwing a cat to the side.
Whoa.
I'm joking.
Scandal. Hold it back. Come on.
Okay. And Zorkthar does fight back here, and Team Norway do get a point against Israel. And, you know, very, very big win there. Whenever you win a matchup that you just shouldn't in most circumstances, that, you know, puts you in a really, really nice spot in most, you know, normal formats or like commonly played formats. And even now, like, they could have gone 0-2 down quite easily there. Jade Druid against Taunt Warrior, very, very difficult.
Gonna be honest, still thinking about the kitty. I heard every word you say. I mean, that matchup, it was the crucial point was that they ran so dry on cards in the mid game. That the Auctioneer turn was great. They hit 2 innovates, just chaining off the Auctioneer, but it just wasn't enough because the lack of pressure, the moment that you just miss 1 or 2 turns in a row, which they didn't really have full mana utilization.
Well, Earthen scales into innovate, right?
Right, yeah, they didn't really have full mana utilization for a couple of turns, and then you need a huge amount of compensation to come out in 1 or 2 turns from your Auctioneer after that to make up for it when your opponents actually had a very strong draw as to getting towards the quest and getting it completed.
Yeah, and I think the issue was there are games you run out of cards a little bit as Druid if you don't draw the Nourishes, etc., or the Wraths, for example. But if the cards you do have, you know, Jade Idol into Jade Blossom into Jade Spirit, well, those minions can start doing some work. We didn't see any of that. I think it was turn 4 or 5, and we saw a 2/2 Jade onto the board, like, and as well as running out of cards. So very difficult. We have got the next game coming up soon. It's going to be Glacier from Israel and Diggen for Norway. And it is going to be the Paladin and Shaman matchup. And you know, we talked about this yesterday again, but you know, Shaman decks are really sort of interesting me at the moment. I feel like every time I see one, it's different. But I do feel like the Jade Elemental combo with the Spirit Echoes is sort of pushing itself a little bit higher and a little bit above the other lists.
Yeah, and much to your chagrin and much to my delight, both players turned down the Mage for the opportunity of playing this, which Discover Mage, Gunter Mage is the dominant form of that deck right now. Now, you've played a ton of that deck. You know, for once, I will choose to defer to your expertise because you've played a lot more of it than I have. Why do you think players have moved themselves off the Mage coming up against the potential lineup of Shaman and Paladin that they would have been up against?
Yeah, so I think one, you never really want to play a mirror match unless you've teched for it, right? Sure. You know, like, you just don't want to play a mirror in general. And then both of these classes, because I said the Spirit Echo style as well, and the Paladins could very easily contain a lot of healing. Very easily. We're seeing the Zoth Paladin become more and more popular now, which, you know, with the Cairn, the Forbidden Heals, we can see Doomsayer in hand already. And even with Alex Strasser and some burst, the crazy amount of damage you can do as the Mage, if your opponent just gets off the big heals at the right time, we saw yesterday, Voodoo Doctors doing work in Rogue against the Mage list, right? If they just get that bit more healing than you want them to have, you can actually just run out of cards, or just run out of burn opportunities, and they probably just don't want to risk that when that's the risk, or a mirror match. You know, like, it's kind of awkward to make that decision, or they could play their Shaman or Paladin and feel more comfortable against whatever their opponent picks.
Well, settle in, guys, because this is probably going to be a fairly grindy one. The presence of Devolve in the Shaman probably means that it's going to be fairly slow-paced. Jinyu Waterspeaker seems to speak to that as well. And as Raven mentioned, Doomsayers, Stonehill Defenders, Stampeding Kodos, everything lining up that this is a slow-paced, more controlling Paladin deck as well. So looks like there is going to be a straight-up war for value going on in this matchup.
Yeah, and I think you know, in these matchups like this, it actually happens very quickly, the win, right? You know, like, it's normally one turn where, say, the board is cleared on one side and the player can't put enough back onto the board to battle for it or can't clear it themselves, and then the snowball starts to happen. But that point normally takes a very, very long time, as both players normally have the tools they need to fend off anyone getting too far ahead for the majority of the game.
Yeah, and they should be able to back and forth each other to a certain extent. You know, the Shaman will now probably have Volcano in there. They have the Devolve as well. Several other AoE possibilities, and Paladins, of course, are quality combinations with Consecration and possibly Pyromancer as well. So it probably won't be as simple as, you know, one big board clear and then dominate, because then there will be the big board clear coming back.
Yeah, but I just mean the end happens very quickly, right? Once those board clears are gone, for example. And it's going to be interesting here as well for the... because the Doomsayer has been played and Glass has seen it, what are the odds on just Jin Yu played on 4? If you see a Doomsayer in Paladin, he probably ain't rushing you down, right?
Right.
So, you know, Jin Yu is effectively a water elemental that doesn't freeze. It does overload you a bit, but not the end of the world. But just a 3/6 is actually super awkward to deal with for Paladin.
I'm looking at Norway's hand right here, and that Harrison draw, there hasn't been any charges used of that J-Claws just yet, so this Acolyte of Pain does not ask for an attack from the weapon either, and then you have the possibility of the Coin Harrison coming out for a huge punish, but Glacier here can actually kind of create an awkward board state at the same time. Like, Manatide Totem hitting the board would be a kind of bad feeling to just Coin Harrison into, because then the Manatide Totem sticking to the board and you're kind of breaking even on this weird card draw effect, so there's actually a very weird, tense board state starting to evolve here as these two players just cagey opening jabs being thrown out, with each player trying to get an early advantage in the board lead.
Yeah. It's definitely a tough choice, because honestly, I think Jin Yu just feels fine. Here on this board, you can clear off the Acolyte, trades directly into it.
Describe feel.
Fishy. What is the Jin Yu? Have you seen?
Oh,
it's
not expecting that. I was not prepared. I thought I was ready. I wasn't ready.
Gotta keep you on your toes somehow.
Yeah.
But it just goes straight into the Acolyte. The Acolyte doesn't really present any you know, situations. Now, Diggin can get pure value here by Aldor Peacekeepering the Manatide and getting at least 2 cards from this Acolyte. Probably not going to happen.
Not going to happen, no.
Do you like Coin Stampeding Kodo?
Possibly. I mean, Coin Kodo is definitely a consideration. You can also just True Silver it. Like, the more minions you put on the board, the more you're encouraging your opponent to find a way to use one of those Jade-Claws attacks.
Yeah, I just think Kodo on 5 health. Like, that's a weird, like, I guess Jade Lightning.
Jade Lightning and hit it.
But you're
right.
Jade Lightning the Acolyte, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can just take all of that argument out of the equation and say, okay, well, he didn't swing into this Acolyte last turn. He's probably not going to swing into it again. I can just True Silver this Manatide.
Might swing into the True Silver.
And then I can just... Is that what I said?
No.
Oh, okay.
I should have said yeah and be like, that's all.
Oh, God, I'm so dumb. He can just go ahead and True Silver the Manatide and then just, you know, reliably have that Harrison coming out. But looks like the coin's being used. It will probably be the Kodo rather than the Harrison, but he does. No, he's just going to coin the Harrison. Wow, this is pretty surprising to me.
You draw 2 cards, I'll draw 2, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's keep it even, except to be fair, this is way more pressure than the Manatide. Gets to draw 2 cards. There are 2 Doomsayers in the list that we can see now from Diggin. Volcano. Go for the overdraw.
Yeah, not the best card when there's an Acolyte in play, but I can understand him wanting to hold on to the Kodo here. I understand Norway wanting to hold on to the Kodo because they do have Aldor for that sort of ultimate check on anything that they want. But yeah, the lack of True Silver there does really confuse me, because it does feel like just keeping the equilibrium for a turn there was perfectly reasonable, and it just works out slightly more favorable for you in the long run because you deny an extra card to your opponent off the Manatide.
Yeah. Despite we didn't see Kodo into Burn Tyrion with the overdraw. Not Kodo, Volcano. I'm just saying, it's because I've got a Kodo on the mind.
Stampeding Volcano.
Stampeding Volcano, yeah. Does the same thing, right? Kill stuff. So, right
sounding more and more like Lorinda every day.
Well, 1 cast with him and it's already going down. Yeah. Ragnar's Sightlock coming off the top there for Diggin. So, as we said, this is going to be a relatively slow-paced game. It's all about who can get the most value out of all of these cards. Kalimos as well for Glacier at the top. Again, this is going to be a weird matchup for Kalimos as well. Do you just play the 1/1s for them to get cleaned up? You know, like 6 damage to face. Awesome. They probably just heal it next turn, you know.
It's a very useful card to have if a Tarian board happens, for example.
True.
Then you can have just that clean AoE to come down. Kodo is going to be used here, denying the extra card, so True Silver being held back. I wonder if they're just a little bit afraid of weapon destruction themselves happening, because, as I mentioned yesterday, these slower Shaman decks, when I've been running into them on ladder, I never really traced the source as to whether this is just a net deck list, but when I have run into slow Shamans on ladder, they have generally been packing a Harrison Jones.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if Diggin and Norway do have that same thought, and they're just trying to conserve the weapon charges until there's just an absolute emergency situation.
Yeah, and they're still representing like kind of a dangerous board here. There's a lot of damage on there as well, and the Acolyte is awkward, so it doesn't mean, you can just simply just drop any old minion there. And also, it's enough damage to start threatening lethal over the course of a few turns, or at least the setup. It's not really high value, though, for Norway and for Diggin. He's sitting there with Raglight Lord, he's got Spite Ridge, he's got Stonehill to probably discover him a legendary top minion as well. So I really like this setup, and he's going to go for the Volcano.
He's going to take the overdraw here. He's going to burn 1 card, I believe. 9 in hand right now. This will be 10, and then the natural draw will be 11.
Calling it.
Called it now. Going to be Tyrion, apparently.
Oh, close.
Not a big deal.
Could have been Tyrion with a Getaway Kodor redemption.
You're reaching. You're definitely reaching right now. But yeah, there could have been a factor that I probably didn't really consider enough, that Diggin was just trying to pressure a lot more heavily than I gave him credit for. And if you're trying to pressure, the way he was doing it was the most efficient way, which is to play the minions first, because weapons essentially have charge. So over the course of 3 or 4 turns of building up pressure and damage, having the weapon be the last thing you do is the most efficient way of doing it, more or less. So
also, Spite Ridge Steed as well in hand means that you can start building. You Spite Ridge Steed something, it doesn't like give it a huge burst of damage, but it means that the minion's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's it's damage and
straight to Frogtown is where it's going.
If there's a hex there.
Yeah.
But then that just means the rest of your big dudes are safe, right? So you're probably happy.
It's a win. If you get a 6 mana card hexed, sure it's on a small body as well, but if you get one of your 6 mana cards hexed, and that means Raglight Lord or Tyrion sticks around, then yeah, sweet. You'll take that all day, every day of the week.
So now it's on Israel to deal with this board. Burn Bristle on the board now. Kind of annoying, but his ability isn't too crazy. Although you Spite Ridge Steed a Burn Bristle, and things start to get a little bit cool as you actually heal for the amount of damage he does.
Yes.
So it's actually pretty good to be able to claw yourself out of an awkward spot, but Norway isn't really in an awkward spot at the moment. 27 health means the health gain is negligible, and I think it's just a bit of pressure. A minion they have to consider and deal with, as opposed to going hard or trying to set up, some kind of big Burn Bristle, because you're probably just expecting a hex at this point.
Only a Crazed Worshipper picked up from the Stonehill defender as well. I feel like since the first week or two, when we were just talking about how nuts Stonehill was, and it was, it was really just very much early on making an appearance in Paladin as people realized how insane it was. Yeah. We were talking about how great it was, and we were seeing Tyrions and Tarim come from it every single time.
We pioneered to that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We'll claim full responsibility. But since then, I feel like the last week or two, there's been consistently terrible Paladin Stonehill defenders.
They've just pulled the lever down.
Yeah, exactly. 400% is a little too much. Let's
just on Paladin.
Yeah.
Damn, we gave Paladin all the legendaries have torn.
The power level of Paladin in general, though, in this expansion has come from kind of incremental improvement through the last couple of expansions, because they were in a very rough spot during the last year of standard rotation at various points. So they were given some very strong cards, some very strong legendary minions to try and compensate for that. Burn Bristle, Raglight Lord, etc. Now, suddenly a lot of the other cards have rotated out that were just kind of stronger than what Paladin had to offer, but Paladin have still got all these shiny new tools that they were given in the last year or so, and have added things like Sunkeeper Tarim to that.
This is insane.
And it's just an insane combination of power cards all the way along the curve now for Paladin.
Don't Aldor the Tar Creeper, Diggin.
I'm sure he knows.
I'm sure he does.
He, unlike you, played Hearthstone.
Wow, I said I did it once, okay, Saul? Jeez. So mean.
It's fine. The amount of dumb mechanics mistakes I've made during this tournament, I have no right to talk.
There you go. I like it when you reprimand yourself, Subtle, you have no right. Okay, Subtle.
You've let the stream down, you've let your casting partner down, but most importantly...
You've let the country down.
All right, fair enough. I'll take it.
Okay, so Elise is an option here for Israel. One of the weird sort of interactions with Elise is, well, when you're playing a control deck, you normally like to have a full hand. you play Elise, potentially draw the pack, and can't play the pack because your hand is full, as it does generate 5 cards from the Ungoro expansion. But definitely just a good minion to have on board. It's just a 5/5 for 5. Like, doesn't sound fancy, but a lot of the time you don't need fancy. It just gets the job done. Kind of awkward for your opponent to deal with a lot of the time with that 5 health, and puts the value into your deck for later on.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to love, right? 5 mana, 5/5.
I was surprised that we had so much stats.
Potential infinite value, and just like that amazing warm, cuddly feeling that you get from cracking open Hearthstone packs. Like this card is just an absolute winner all around. It's powerful, it's fun, it's entertaining, it's good for casuals, it's part of the competitive game, it's a value engine. Like, it's just one of the best design cards that we've seen in a long time.
It took them a few years, but Blizzard finally got a roleplay card that Soto does in fact enjoy.
It took them a few years, but Blizzard finally learned how to make a card.
Wow, I want to go on record as not... the opinions of Sol do not represent the opinions of me.
You said it, not me.
No, I didn't.
It definitely did.
Okay.
That's what I heard.
Well, you hear what you want to hear, Sol. It's all evil, evil things. So, moving swiftly on from talking about card design, that Spirit Steed is now kind of a lot better on Burn Bristle. It can trade straight in to the Hot Spring for really once, and opens up just a True Silver plus 1/1 onto the Elise as well.
Ton of options, and I really like a point Lorinda made yesterday, which he said just kind of occurred to him, that people are saying, like a lot of people are saying they're really enjoying this meta because it's more skill intensive, the games are going longer, therefore there's more decisions. But it's also because there's just a lot of decks that generate a lot of value, those kind of recurring value cards that I was talking about, 2/2s that put a card in your hand, etc.
Glyph into Pyro.
Exactly, which means your hand size is generally quite large. So even not just over the course of the game are you making more decisions, but on any given turn, you have a ridiculous range of decisions to choose from.
And this isn't even, you look at this Paladin list, you look at this Shaman list, this isn't even as like super control heavy and, hand intensive as you can get in this meta. You look at some Priest lists, for example, and like it gets ludicrous along with, if you throw Lyra in the mix as well. Second Jade Claws is available for Glacier. I've kind of forgotten what the Jade count is. Is it just a 2/2 for the claws? We've not seen Jade Lightning, right?
It's irrelevantly small, let's leave it at that.
I wonder if this is good enough for a Kalimos. Just clear the board. Just
Kalimos is active, and if you wanted to keep it active for the next turn, you have to play a Flame Elemental this turn, which doesn't really offer too much. So just leaving, a 7/7 on board against nothing here and clearing off the remainder of your own... it's only...
You keep the Elise, you keep the Elise as well. So I do like this, because not the nicest and highest value Kalimos clear in the world, as we said. This board, if it was just Sunkeeper Tarim, changes a few things, that's insane.
Right.
But this just clears the board, resets it, and now says, okay, I've got the board now, I've got enough high value minions on there, even just in the form of a 7/7. There's also, Flame Tongue Jade Claws in hand, for example, like that's actually just a hell of a lot more additional damage.
Yeah, and the momentum of this matchup has actually switched significantly with that Kalimos hitting the board now, because early on we saw it was Diggon that was generating pressure, playing out his hand, and it was Israel sitting back, just waiting and waiting and waiting, trying to react to the board state, had a handful of cards. Now we see that it's Norway who are facing down pressure from Israel. Their handful of cards, they need to make sure they're able to get these on the board and actually do something, because there's too much value in their hand right now. They can't play Curator. It's going to overdraw them if they do, most likely. So they need to find some way of actually starting to turn cards in your hand, which actually have a value rating of 0, into cards on the board, which is where their value actually comes into play.
Yeah, I wonder how good Doomsay into the Crazed Worshipper is.
I think that's what we're most likely to see here. Yeah.
I think it gets 2 cards out. It might give you the initiative back on the board if it's not dealt with. If it is dealt with, then, Israel have actually put in a good chunk of resources to deal with it, whether it be a Hex, whether it be some kind of, removal spell as well. Because, the Kalimos cleans up the Doomsayer pretty nicely. What about the 3/6 when you've only got a 1/3 on the board?
And again, as we talked about before, Israel are not going to want to use a Hex here. They
not at all.
They know there are enough high-value threats in the deck that Hex is going to get usage, but I believe they can just get through nicely enough with combinations of Jade Claws, Flame Tongue, Maelstrom Portal, be able to punch through the 6 quite nicely. No great concern about doing multiple sources of damage to the Crazed Worshipper here. It's not likely to have an impact.
Imagine if it pops
It's
up
just-
and you're
I'm
like,
waiting for it
oh!
One day, I was like with the Tempo Mage, I was waiting for that one day where like
Yeah.
Cult Sorcerer Coin Arcane Blast on a Totem Golem happened and Cthulhu just ticks twice. off
And you're
the
like,
spells.
don't like this.
What's happening?
Okay, so Flaming Totem, as you said, is going to help with this clear, make it very clean indeed. The extra damage going into Doomsday is a little bit unfortunate for Israel. 9 damage is a very large hit, but one, this is, you know, again, battled for the board, not given the initiative over to Diggin, but also this has gained the ability to play the pack because it's opened up enough card and enough hand space, should I say, and indeed, Hunter Legendary. Swamp King Dread.
I was more on the Blaze Caller. That seems
You would be, Saul.
that seems like a card they're quite fond of having in their deck as a elemental-based shaman.
Also, just adapt on this Kalimos, potentially Wind Fury and get him for 18 if it isn't dealt with.
It is going to be dealt with. A little bit unfortunate on the positioning. There was nothing they could do about it because the 2/2 token and the Maelstrom Portal token were always going to appear on that side anyway. They had to put the Flame Tongue in a specific place, but it did leave them a little bit lopsided if the clear was just going to come down on the Kalamos. Since it was a Pyro Consecration turn, that doesn't really matter anyway since the whole board did go bye-bye.
Yeah. Wow, honestly, these cards from Elise are actually nuts. The Devil Saw Egg with Adapt, you can get work done.
Ooh.
You know, there's a lot of stuff you can do here. Even if you play the, for who I'm affectionately calling Nessie, that is the basically Loch Ness Monster. No copyright, I'm guessing. And you know, if you play that onto the board, then suddenly, you know, Adapt can come out of nowhere as well with either Divine Shield plus Attack, even Wind Fury at that as well. So there's just a lot of options. You know, you can actually just make something happen out of nowhere with this Adapt.
Are you suggesting that someone like owns the copyright on the Loch Ness
Yes.
monster? Okay.
The monster itself, obviously.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It's like, can you not use my image in this?
You've tried to negotiate with his agent before.
Exactly,
but, yeah,
exactly. For
okay.
wanted an interview. Wonder if it's okay its likeness to be used in Hearthstone.
Yeah. Sated Threshodon, is that the
Threshodon,
actual
yeah.
name of the card? Okay. Primordial Drake picked up is actually kind of a whiff. It's a great card to have, but it's a card you were going to draw eventually off the Curator anyway, so there's some other, you know, more utility cards. I don't want to liken it to drawing patches to that extent, but, you know, it's a card that you were going to pull off the Curator effect at some point anyway, so it is a dead draw in some sense to that anyway.
Yeah, this egg is actually a problem.
It's a
So
draw, right?
there's a hit with the weapon into the egg, then you can equality Drake. But then there's a 4/4 on the board instead of like a 5/5 that the egg would spawn anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You could do the other way with Aya, but then there's a 5/5, so it does end up trading the egg is better first. Even if you want to do that, because that's the problem, right? But if you don't do that, the board is, I feel like you're always going to fall behind on the board no matter what else you do this turn.
Yeah, hopefully for Norway's sake, there is a second Drake in this deck or some other dragon that they can get towards. We've also seen the Kodo as well, so interesting to see if there's going to be, one Drake, one Kodo, so that was an even deader draw than I thought it would be, with potentially a second dragon hanging around as well.
Interesting.
No,
I was thinking like,
no Megasaur either, of course, because it's just not the Murloc package that we're seeing from this Paladin deck. It's pure Control Paladin.
it's going to get even more value from it with the Getaway Coda onto the Curator. It's going to draw nothing whatsoever. But at the end of the day, it's a 4/6 taunt, right? So could it be worthwhile in the end?
It also gives Israel some significant information there, just in terms of the reads. One card was drawn, and then it was played. The Hydrologist. So they knew what the one card that was drawn was a Murloc. They saw the other Murloc get burned. With the second Hydrologist was the card that was burned off the Volcano turn. So they've seen a Kodo get played. They now know there's no more Kodos in the deck, first and foremost. And they know, probably, that there is a Primordial Drake in hand. Because, of course, you are playing Primordial Drake in
fantastic
your
card.
Control Paladin.
When you play Curator as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it, just Stranglethorn there. It's like Stranglethorn Tiger, and then just like random dragon in the deck as well. Just anything but Primordial Drake will be amazing.
Rip an Emerald Hive Queen.
Yeah,
for
just
no
do it.
reason.
Just be like, yeah, sure. Devolve. Ooh! Speaking of beasts, at least you can bounce the 1/2. Imagine if it was just high main, you'd be like, ha. Can I evolve again back to Curator, please?
Yeah.
Although Hex was always a get-out-of-jail-free card here, though. If anything too crazy happened, you could just Hex kill and then send the frog back to the hand.
Just gained 9 stats. It was a 4/6. Now it's a 6/5 with 2 2/2s inside it.
I'll give you this 1 point on the Devolve Wars.
Thank you. Finally, Raven accredits me with a point.
It's because it's Hunter card.
Yeah, there you go.
So now it's starting to stack up to just be a lot of potential damage for Team Israel here. There's the Blaze Caller to come out of nowhere if it's set up to be, just 5 damage from hand. And, Adapt can again at, +3, even +1. Wind Fury, obviously the big ones. But even just Poisonous out of nowhere as well kind of equates to damage by defending your board in the long run. So, all these options are kind of huge here. And, even if those options don't really open themselves up to Israel next turn, you could just slam Swamp King Dread and be okay with it.
I would be okay with that in this situation, yeah. I mean, Paladin has... Norway have already used a couple of board clears. We've seen Pyro Consecration come out in the same turn, which can be very powerful in specific instances. But as someone on the other side, when I see my Paladin opponent use Pyro and Consecration in the same turn,
yeah,
I can't help but feel good about it, because then that's 2 of the bigger quality activators that have gone down. You do have a lot more room to be able to do that these days, however, because of Primordial Drake, as now as an additional activator for equality in the late game.
And we see the effective nerfed version of the Nerubian Egg kicking in there. Is that egg is not procced because it has 3 health, not 2.
Yep.
You can really start to see the power that Nerubian Egg had when it was in rotation, because suddenly there'll be an additional 4/4 on the board if that was the case now. Hotspring Guardian along with Jinyu means that Israel can put themselves relatively safe here onto the board in terms of health and developer taunt. Could be a Hex. Does High Main warrant a Hex? Tough question when there's still Tyrion, Rag Light Lord, etc. And I think one more Stonehill?
I think we've only seen one.
Yeah, because there was the Craze Worshipper.
Yeah.
Nothing else, right?
I think so.
So, even that's just a consideration. It's going to be Blaze Caller this turn.
I think they had a little look around that turn just to find some cheeky routes to a potential lethal, because they had Hex to bust through the taunt very efficiently. They had Adaptation, which could have been, up to a Wind Fury on a 5/5 in terms of damage. They also had Blaze Caller, but of course all 3 of those cards in combination were 11 mana, so they couldn't quite find a way through, just went back to the board control plan. Going to try and potentially drag this out for one more turn, and then they've got a pretty good-looking lethal setup if there was no defensive options from Norway this turn.
Yeah, and this Elise pack has really been good to Team Israel, because if you look at the board, you're like, oh, well, Paladin can just clear and heal, it's fine. Egg and Thresher, and even the 3, 1/1 Murlocs are a problem. Just because even just some chip damage more than anything at this point. They're only on 11 health. Like, those 2 Death Rattles actually change up quite a lot here for Team Norway. It's going to be interesting to see how they choose to deal with this. Can't really go... I feel like you can't really go too hard on 1 minion, so even Spike Ridge Seed on the 1/1 seems more reasonable than, making the High Main huge, just because we've still not seen any Hexes get played yet from Team Israel.
Yeah. Kind of a weird calculation about who wins on value in that case. If you've got your 7-mana Curator that drew you a card, which then got devolved into a High Main, which you then put Spike Ridge Steed on and it gets hexed. Like, who's actually happy with that scenario?
Us.
Yeah. Good call. Hey, Stonehill's back, baby.
Yeah, there goes Tyrion. I remember when we were in the hotel, we were playing, and you were like, "Oh, Raven, just play this turn for me. Just Stonehill or Tyrion." I was like, "Yeah, no worries, mate." Yeah. Click Stonehill, click Tyrion, done. You were like, "For God's sake." But yeah, Tyrion's absolutely an amazing pick off Stonehill, and this changes everything around a little bit. We were talking about, Crazed Worshipper, not terrible, but definitely not fantastic either, and also kind of a counter to the Swamp King Dread to a certain extent. One of the few cards you're happy to play into it, right? Not happy to lose the Divine Shield, but you probably set up a on-board kill whilst not losing a minion.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there's a bit of a misconception from some people looking at Swamp King Dread. If you play a couple of small minions into it and it kills itself, I think that's something you should generally be unhappy about. Like, Swamp King Dread allows you to use minions as removal. Like, you can almost view what it does as a downside, because you can almost always get it off the board, even if it's just playing minions.
The issue is when it's high value on board minions you need to play. Like, that's when it blocks those out, that's why it's good. Or can be good, should I say.
Right.
Oh, this Thresher and Murloc's getting the work done with the help of this Flametongue Totem.
And look at how important, you mentioned it just in terms of maintaining the board state with the Death Rattle minions that they had, but look at how important that Elise pack has been to just Israel's hand. They have
to not losing the game.
right. They have 4 cards in hand right now. They have had 5 cards come out of that Elise pack, which means they would be running on 0 resources right now if it wasn't for the Elise. Just goes to show just how important it is in these mid-range and control battles to have that value engine.
Yeah, and kind of crazy as well that Hex still not being used on the high main. They're only on 16 health. Not expecting a lot of burst to come out of Paladin, of course. But still, like, it's still 7 damage this turn, potentially. Plus, you know, maybe a weapon, maybe a buff of some kind. And that could change everything here. But this Hex just being held on and held on and held on. Specifically, no doubt, for this Tyrion.
Yeah, Spikeridge Steed is starting to look very appealing this turn because of how nicely it will deal with the Flame Tongue Totem on the 1-1. And there it is. But yeah, I think Israel, from their perspective, they know there's a natural Tyrion. With how slow they've seen the deck is, they know there's probably a Rag Light Lord. They've just seen Stonehill Defender number 2 get played, so they know there's another chance of at least, let's say, Grime Street Protector hitting the board. Like, their hexes will find targets, and as soon as they start using hexes, that gives the green light for Diggen and for Norway to start just dropping those huge minions on the board, because I think that's a big reason why we haven't seen Raglight Lord or this Tyrion come into play just yet, because they know they haven't seen a Hex. But Israel are now finally saying, do you know what? Spikeridge Steed, as annoying as that card is, that will do. I will take my Hex and move on. Maelstrom Portal is very strong for me here, allowing me to push through. Runic Egg is actually right up their street right now in terms of what they need to potentially get some value, but they're going to have a bit of trouble activating it, especially now they're using the adaptation on a minion that isn't the egg.
Yep. Wind Fury not fantastic here. Poisonous though. Get some work done. Just 1 attack, 6 health though means that you can leverage the 6 health to start getting good trades onto the board. Insta-killing them with that Poisonous adaptation. And Swamp King Dread is going to have to almost carry the rest of the game out here for Israel, I feel.
That is a really annoying minion. 1/4. 1/4 Poisonous that's getting regenerated by a healing totem. That is a trolly minion.
Yeah, I'll probably play that minion. So now, the issue, or the main issue here is, what do you do? As that Poisonous changes everything here. One way or the other, whatever you play is going to die. You might just say, okay, I can Forbidden Healing this turn and wait. Just go up to full health, trade off 2 of the minions. Or you could go Ragnaros Light Lord and say, I'll take the 8 and the self-kill on the poison, right? Because it's going to poison itself.
I have a different proposal. What if you just play the Tyrion, accept the fact that it's going to get traded into by the Poisonous thing, and just slap them in the face with Ashbringer a couple of times?
You could. How worried are you about getting killed, though? You're only 11 health.
Well, you're playing a Tyrion, which means the majority of this remaining damage is going into the Tyrion, even with the Poisonous. 1 attack has to break the Divine Shield, 1 attack has to kill it. So there's really not an awful lot of damage hitting you in the face, and this just sets up lethal now.
Yeah, it's actually looking pretty good, isn't it? Jade Lightning not going to do... It's not going to not do too much, but it doesn't really do what they need it to do, right?
4-4? 3-3 at this point? It's been a long time since we've seen a Jade.
4-4. Okay. Maybe even 5-5 because of Aya was out,
Aya
right?
was played, right.
So 5-5, right. I think.
Swamp King, is it finally his time?
I hope so. It's golden as well. So good.
Israel are just trying to find a way out of this. 2 trades, as I mentioned, do have to go into the Tyrion, whether it's the attacks or the Jade Lightning. Doesn't really make too much of a difference. And yeah, they have to fish. They just have to look for answers off the Runic Egg. Didn't hit Taunt Totem. 5/5 Jade comes out here. Servant of Palamos, too expensive. And that is just going to be a hard-fought victory for Norway in this spot. And that is very, very, very well navigated. At times during that matchup, both teams were in control in terms of trying to pressure the opponent, and both teams consistently recognized when they were the aggressor and when they were playing the defensive side. And in the end, it was that one last aggressive push. I said, you can just jam Tyrion here, not care about it as a body, and it sets up lethal. And Diggen and Norway spotted it as well. Definitely looked like the right push to make, and it got them over the line in the end.
Yeah, it was a really cool game overall. Just a lot of intricate choices, you said. And just think about, like, if they just didn't draw the Elise pack that early. like they would just
It would have been a
be
blowout.
in trouble because Elise and the pack itself did so much extra work. Even the adaptation at the end, the poison actually just made things happen and made the boss a little bit awkward. Obviously, just Tyrion just ended up finishing it anyway because of Ashbringer.
Yeah.
But I imagine if that was any other card except Tyrion, suddenly. Well, whatever you play just dies quite easily, and then you're behind one more turn, and then so on, so on.
Yeah,
it
and
could steamroll.
You saw the waltz of the Hex really taking place as well.
Yeah.
They tried to hold on to it for as long as they possibly could. Norway tried to hold on to their Light Lord and their Tyrion for as long as they could in response to that card specifically being held. And it came right down in the end to the fact that the Hex was forced, and then Tyrion was free to reign, and Ashbringer finished the job. But there was a little cheeky raise of the eyebrows there from Raven as we see our matchup chart happening again. And it looks like Hunter is going to enter proceedings from Zirez, who I believe has been playing Rogue more often than not in the opening games. I think he's played Rogue in at least one of his two, and I have a feeling it was both of
Yeah,
the
I think he
opening
has.
rounds.
Yeah, I think he has, but...
One game he had to play as the ace player as well. I think he's actually played three times at this point.
But yeah, we see him locking in Hunter, and you probably noticed over the course of a few weeks I've talked about Hunter a couple of times, and I think Zyrez is very quickly becoming another Hunter guy. We were talking about deck building. You said he's been playing Rogue a lot in HCG. Playing a Hunter a lot on ladder, and he's been streaming it as well. And he's been coming up with the list that Hunter had quite a rise as soon as the expansion came out, because everyone was like, "Hey, we can actually play this class again. Let's do it." I mean, I did.
Yeah.
And then took a bit of a dip again as suddenly some of the matchups became a bit too difficult, I would say. But Zyrez has actually been pushing the deck building and building these new lists. I think he's built like 3 or 4 different versions in the past 5 days, maybe, of Hunter, and exactly how he wants it to work. And already, okay, Zyrez, we can be friends again. Not that we weren't ever not friends, because I've met Zyrez a couple of times, hung out and stuff. Definitely a cool guy. But
Confirmed, Raven hates Zyrez.
Lies, all lies. I crafted Golden Swamp King Dread.
Why?
Because it looks badass, and it's a Hunter legendary.
All right, can't argue with that.
Exactly. And, although I can't confirm whether Zyrez does have it himself, as these are super accounts that the teams use, it doesn't matter. He's put it in his
Don't
deck.
advertise that. Everyone will want one. Jeez.
I mean, I want one, so it's fine.
That's true, yeah, I want one too. Lizard, if you're out there.
Yeah.
Don't give one to him. He said terrible things about your card design earlier.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
We'll rewind that and check it out. But it's going to be Hunter versus Priest, and I believe regardless of your build, this is going to be a tough one if the Priest gets any form of early control here.
How does Northshire Cleric into Coin Talon Priest into the second Talon Priest sound to you?
Fine, but you want to kill
I have a counter proposal.
Yeah.
How does Northshire Cleric into Radiant Elemental Coin Shadower Pain into Cabal Talon Priest
to win the
Cabal
game?
Talon Priest
Yeah.
sound to you, Raven?
That one sounds a little bit better, my
Okay,
friend. Yeah, I do like this one. And then when Zerez already is just hero powering against this board, and there's a second Pain available now. This game might not last that long at this point. Already a second Pain, and just I don't know how Zerez is gonna just deal with this, to be completely honest. Everything else is a bit slow.
I know exactly how he's going to deal with this.
Swamp King Dread.
Nope.
Oh.
There's a little button in the bottom right of the screen.
Does it play Swamp King Dread?
No.
Does the button say press this and summon a Swamp King Dread onto the board and beat Priest?
Kills all your opponent's minions. In fact, the entire board disappears.
Ah.
Yeah.
Have you used this button often, Sol?
I have not. Never used it in my life.
Oh. You get beat too quickly to need to.
Yeah, I didn't actually see the Radiant Elemental in hand, because as I was suggesting the Coin Talon Priest to Talon Priest, like it was in this kind of position here, but the Radiant Elemental Shadow World Pain just completely blew the game out, and now Talon Priest is just a nonsense. Seriously, there's a couple, maybe, of comeback mechanisms available. Direwolf and Unleash is something that can do some work. If there's Hunter's Mark in the deck that can then be combined with that later on, maybe there's a chance.
I love the pause. I love it. It was like, okay, I'll just Makar Unleash, deal with this, whatever. Kill the Cleric with the 3 dot. Oh, the phone. There's an 9B card in my hand now. And even though it's 3 mana, it is playable. And I like the look of Sans in that Radiant. Or do you think the Cleric is more valuable? It's tough.
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
Radiance just never dies.
I know. You can silence the 2/6 and it's essentially double value. You're removing an on-board effect and you're removing a buff. But then you just leave a 1/1 and a 2/1 on the board against a Northshire Cleric that can just happily trade into it and heal up. And maybe when you're Norway on this potential, your potential win condition is, hey, Priest is low on cards right now. If we kill this Cleric, maybe he just starts drawing silly cards like, a copy of Zero Mana Silence or whatever else that he might have in his deck, and we can just outvalue him over the next few turns.
Yeah, what I was thinking was if you go for the Iron Beak Owl this turn, then you can unleash Direwolf next turn and try and make something happen in forms of clearing the board. But it looks like Xera's does go for the original plan as he just stops to discuss it with his teammates, and now he's just taking a break, and now he's back.
And I think I like this. Like, it's much harder to do with Hunter, admittedly, but I've had games back in the day of, Zoo against Control Priest, where you don't really get a good blowout start. They have good answers for your early game as Zoo, but then you just start trading. You just draw 2 cards every turn, and eventually they run out of stuff because a lot of Priest cards are quite low value. That's going to be very hard to do because it seems from the Netherspite historian that this is Dragon Priest that Norway are up against, but they don't know that yet. They don't know whether it's a massive value-packed Priest deck or whether it's a more combo-based Priest, in which case they can potentially draw dead later on.
They're about to find out.
They are.
Yeah. Netherspite historian is going to draw another dragon as well. The Twilight Drake, not fantastic with only 4 cards in hand, but probably good enough to apply some pressure later on. And this new dragon, Draconid Operative, seems pretty good to me for next turn. I don't think there's a world you even consider needing Deathwing in this game compared to the Operative.
You think you always at least consider the need for Big Daddy D-Wing.
Oh yeah, I also crafted him in gold as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the card. I just mean with Operative.
Yeah, no way.
You're so far ahead, right?
Yeah, every time.
You are so far ahead. You already have the dragon to combo with it. It's much better to leave Twilight Drake as one of the dragon battery, so to speak, in the hand at the moment.
Well, let's see how effectively Israel can start to plow through this late game, because there is a bunch of it. There is Highmane, there's Swamp King Dread just coming right up, and then Tundra Rhino could potentially get some late game value as well. So they are going to need a few answers here. They do have the beginnings of an aggressive push of their own with the Hunter on 20 and themselves being able to push 9 more this turn, but Highmane demands a certain level of respect.
Yeah, also turn 9 Tundra Rhino into Houndmaster as well isn't too bad in itself. The Houndmaster doesn't get charged, but the Tundra Rhino is much more resilient to Priest.
Looks like just Operative coming down to contest it here is going to be the pickup. There is a Hunter's Mark in the deck, and it's going to be snap-picked here, playable for 0.
Wow.
Unnerfed Hunter's Mark confirmed.
Yeah, good card. I'd probably play Hunter's Mark if it was 0 mana again.
And Zera's giving out the giggle. He appreciates the subtle irony of what just happened to him, getting punished by a 0 mana Hunter's Mark.
This is the maybe subtle, maybe not so subtle power of the Raging Elemental as well. Silly things happen. Things that shouldn't be allowed happen. I was talking to Lorinda yesterday, and although it reduces the cost of cards, of spells by 1, the difference between a 6 mana and a 5 mana, Dragonfire, isn't great or isn't too crazy. Difference between 2 and 1 and 1 and 0 is ridiculous. It's insane.
So Shadow Vision's off the top. Shadower Death was offered, but Israel did not take the bait. They took the card that was lethal instead, which makes a lot more sense. The light shall in fact burn Xerez quite literally as the Holy Nova finishes him off, and that was just a complete beatdown. When Priest does hit their early curve, and we talked about mathematical curves being built earlier. Priest does not have one of those. They shouldn't draw a curve consistently, but some games it happens. And when that happens, because of the rest of their deck is built in a way that they give up the possibility of a consistent early game curve, that just makes it a complete blowout when they do line up that 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, and the issue as well, versus Hunter specifically, when they have double Shadow Word Pain, for example, they have all the tools. We didn't even see a Potion of Madness that's probably in the deck as well. All the key cards actually beat out Hunter. But now we're going to see a good old-fashioned Mage off as in the Ace match now. So Glacier is going to play again, and Diggon is going to play again because there is lost, and it is 2-2. The winner of this game takes it for their country and takes it for their team. Mage on Mage action. Is there any way we need to consider that it's not double Discover Mage here?
We need to consider it, for sure. It's most likely...
Oh, wait. I considered it. It's
okay.
not.
All right, well then we'll move on. No, I mean, Freeze Mage is still playable. There are still some believers who think it is still the optimal Mage deck, but for the most part, Discover Mage has taken over in terms of the most common Mage deck being played. There were times where there was flirtations with just outright aggro Mage, as well as with Secret Mage, with Cabal Crystal Runners, etc. But almost certainly, if I had to put some money on the line, I'd say this was going to be a Discover Mage matchup.
Yeah, and this matchup is, very crazy in the early game, I think. The second someone draws a Mana Worm and someone else doesn't, this gets very, very rough indeed. The general way, or at least the general way I play this matchup, I don't deem to be an expert at all, but I've played a good chunk of the deck, and I normally go highly, highly aggressive, and you can beat out your opponent. But what really matters is this is not a mirror match, probably.
Yeah, never mind. Novice Engineer Frost Nova seems to indicate we have a Freeze Mage coming out here from Diggin. Israel, however, do have that much coveted Mana Worm in the opening hand, as well as Glyph Follow-Up and Cabal Courier, and they do seem also very interested in something. They appear to be like trying to peer over their own webcam.
You can't see us, guys. We're not behind you. It's like,
yes, we see you. No, you can't see us. It's like an 80-year-old woman trying to do it, like have a Skype call or something. It's like, how does this work? Do I have to stand this close? No,
it's like
it's all right, Gran. Sit back. We can see.
It's like when you're playing games and like your character's trying to see around the corner, so you bend your head as if you can see around the corner in the game.
People playing games in like horrible 80s movies where they were like steering with their hand at the control pad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the good old days. But in this matchup, again, I do feel actually...
they were watching the mulligan is what was happening. So they wanted to carefully scout out, for example, Quest Mage, and also just get full information on how good the curve was going to be. So they were just very, very highly focused on the top portion of the screen, watching not only which cards got mulliganed away, but which cards were being touched while they are considered. Because the game was recently patched so that mulligans aren't revealed until both players do it, but you do still see the thought process of like which cards they touch with the mouse.
Yeah, and in this matchup, although slightly different, of course, to the mirror, I do think the Discover Mage is actually favored in this because they can just go faster. And a lot of the time, the weird thing about this list is they have minions early and minions very late and nothing in between, right? Yeah. So suddenly they have minions early enough that a lot of the time, well, okay, if you Doomsayer a Mana Worm on 2, great, whatever. But if you Doomsayer and Nova some minions on turn 10 onwards, well, there's probably just an answer in hand to the Doomsayer anyway. So I feel like the Freeze Mage has a really awkward time dealing with the minions that the Discover Mage can potentially develop whilst, staving the damage off long enough to get the burn down, because both decks play Alexstrasza, both decks play Fireballs, both decks probably play Pyroblast. You know what I mean? There's a lot of aggressive options in general.
I'm glad Ice Barrier was just drawn, because it elucidates the point that I was about to make, which is how do you feel about just a 2-3 being on the board here? How much value does minion pressure actually have when you can very often get into a point where you're not going to attack? Is this like a lack of knowledge is exactly what they're up against just yet? Because they haven't in any way confirmed Freeze Mage just yet.
Yeah, I think it's there's definitely a good point to that, but also I think early on, if you can develop minions, you do go through the barrier. It's only mid to late that you ignore it, because the problem is, if you ignore it, you just sort of nullify some of your minions, especially with a Mana Worm opening. Are you telling me, like, if they play a secret, you're just going to not attack with a Mana Worm when you can potentially buff it up and cause a huge threat and hit through the barrier in 2 turns anyway?
I mean, if you can't do 8 immediately, there's always a strong consideration not to attack, because not only do you risk not being able to get that 8 damage through with minions eventually anyway, but you also give them the opportunity to just play a second barrier that they might never be able to get out of their hand otherwise.
That is true, and now, to be honest, with Alexstrasza in hand, that thought path might change a little bit, because you have, okay, worst case, I can now ignore the barrier because now I have to do 15 and not 28, 26, 25, whatever.
I mean, sure, like if you just have minions to develop, you develop the minions and you cross that bridge of whether you're attacking or not when you come to it. But it's the fact that it was a Medivh's Valet specifically, right, that can deal 3 damage from hand later as to whether it was worth having it on the board in that position.
Look at this, though. Glyph into Fireball. 2/2 mana Fireballs go.
Stop it.
Now, this is how you play. Look, Glyph again. That wasn't a Fireball. Glyph again. Watch. It's going to be Fireball, Frostball, or Pyroblast.
In your hundreds of games of playing this deck, Raven, have you not learned anything that isn't just relying on an RNG effect?
Okay, so now you've hit a problem. So you go Mana Bind and steal their Fireball. Done. You get it in the end.
Blanked.
Wait for it. See? Pyro, go. I'm not even joking. Take all the burn, rush him down. Maybe actually you go for the Violence Portal, just gets more on curve here, but maybe go Pyroblast because you've got Alexstrasza, but you might not even need to wait. Saul's not even taking me on now because he knows I'm right and he doesn't want to admit it. Look, to win games, you've got a glyph into burn, okay? And if you don't get it, if you get another glyph on offer, you go glyph again for 0 mana to get some burn. And mana bind's kind of burn.
A whole lot of action going down in the Norway hand right now. They have drawn very, very dead for the past few turns. Haven't really hit any of their early minions. They don't quite have as many as the Discover Mage, but still could have had some options to compete on the board. They have their own Archaeologists, of course. They have their own Medivh's Valets, most likely. Acolytes of Pain as well, that could have contested this board state to an extent. But it's just all the kind of mid-game tools that they've hit too early here. They've drawn one too many secrets, or two too many secrets even, before hitting Archaeologists. Double Blizzard and a Flame Strike. They can deal with this minion pressure now, no problem, but they're not really progressing themselves towards a win condition, and Israel have set themselves up very nicely with that Primordial Glyph turn that you were talking about.
Set up very nicely with a Draconid Operative with the Alexstrasza in hand as well, means that they can potentially steal another Fireball from the Freeze Mage deck. And also, bear in mind, this turn is a very blatant note to Blizzard next turn, because, they ping them, the Frost Nova ping. So
note to Blizzard. Ben Brode, I love you. Love everybody.
I was going to say, I would sign that note.
Yeah.
But you can play... No, you don't want to play minions into AoE, right? But when the minion is a 5/6 that discovers you a card, I'd drop that on there just to keep the pressure high. You know the rest of your board's going to go.
How about a cheeky third ice block?
I like it. It's again, a part of this matchup does turn into Freeze Mage style. How many turns do you get?
Yeah.
An Ice Block is +1 turn, even if it's to gain a ping. Like, sometimes that's the ping you need to kill your opponent.
Ooh, took the Archaeologist, though. Feel like they can play the aggressor here, and they're not going to need 3 Ice Blocks. They'll just take Archaeologist, because it gets them their own Ice Block with an extra 2/3 body.
Yeah, and I guess if they're expecting this Blizzard, then they can play another minion next turn, straight away afterwards, and start building that board up.
Blizzard is going to come down, though, and lock out the board state for now. And there is the Flame Strike to follow this up with that juicy 4 health now on the Operative. Oh, just more and more minion pressure is being picked up for Israel in this spot, and still... Diggin doesn't really have a clear path laid out to him. Now there's Alexstrasza, Pyroblast, and a Medivh's Valet. It's starting to get there in terms of a 2 to 3 turn setup once we get to turn 9, 10 onwards, but still just lacking a little bit of information as to how they want to develop this game through.
Yeah, and, this is one of the tricky things as well, in the fact that, because, Discover Mage discovers a lot of cards in this list, means that secrets can get very, very tricky to play around. The Freeze Mage does one thing and does it very well, but when you say, oh, here's a secret, is it even the Ice Barrier and Block that they normally run? We saw one of the Discover Mage lists yesterday run Counterspell. Suddenly, you've got to think about that in terms of a Pyroblast as well, so it's kind of risky.
Did you see that? Because neither of you seem to give any impression.
Sorry.
Okay.
Lorinda just did his own thing. Yeah, it's the... Maths was on point that day.
It was. The maths was lit.
Yeah. Turned to Rob then for a second.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a Mana Bind, which is going to cause problems. It's not a counterspell. It's not a Spellbender, for example, that causes, directly influences the spell that's played by the opponent. But just handing your opponent another spell is a pretty big deal, and just the thought process that goes behind that is important. And now the old Valet interaction. If you even want to do it. Was that the Ice Barrier played by
Ice Barrier, yeah.
Oh, then you don't do it. You just go face, yeah.
I mean, who cares about this 2/3, right? I mean, you're protecting your own minions. You're stopping it going into your 2/3 and then a ping coming down, but still.
So, Pyroblast next turn if we're playing on curve here for Team Blazer and Discover Mage.
The old 8-mana Pyroblast on curve.
Oh, it's the best kind of Pyroblast.
8 mana Pyroblast on curve into Alexstrasza you back up to 15 on curve.
Yes.
Doesn't seem quite right, Raven. I don't know. You're the expert, but that play doesn't seem to line up quite so well.
You might want the Alexstrasza defensively.
Ah.
If you have Pyro, you have, and then you draw into your second Fireball, into Frostbolts, you just get him. Mm-hmm. It's fine. You save the Alexstrasza for the flashy comeback play afterwards. Oop. Is that another ice block?
Ding! That's
Oh,
barrier.
ooh, okay, that didn't work out quite as well.
I think they've actually scouted that very well. They saw that it was a random secret, so they're like, okay, maybe Counterspell, maybe Mana Bind, maybe Spellbender, or those kind of weird possibilities. So yeah, Ice Barrier, this card is almost useless. Like, yes, it's actually a decent defensive tool for me in this spot, but it's not going to be game-breaking if it gets Counterspelled. If it's Mana Bind, I am not attacking this mage in the face ever, so just enjoy your 0 mana dead useless card.
Yeah, one of the like side benefits is if the first barrier ever gets procced, the second barrier sort of negates Alexstrasza's like hit. You know what I mean? If it even comes to that, that's like this small silver lining here. And I do like this, just go aggressive, especially with the Violence Portal in hand now. All the burn available in the world. I like it,
that
it's fine.
attack has to be wrong, surely.
I think it's fine.
Why?
Got the burn soul!
But you've just healed him for 4!
You laugh at ice barriers in this deck. Look at all your damage, you have Pyroblast, it's fine. There's another Pyroblast in the deck, there's another Violence Portal.
Raven, irrelevant of how much damage you have, why do you want to do 4 more damage than you could have to?
So the only thing I'm thinking here is if there's one, you've got to put your opponent on an answer to Alexstrasza, which you've seen one Blizzard, you've seen one Frost Nova. So yes, they've probably got something, but they do need to kill off Alexstrasza eventually because Norway have put 0 threats down against Israel, and this position means that they can't really Alexstrasza you, because then your block's procced, right? You've got to make that presumption, and if you one block ahead, you just win, actually, in this instance. So we can see the Blizzard come out now, and you know, I maybe over-joking on the burn thing. You know, there's enough damage to kill this opponent regardless. But yeah, you know, he could have chosen not to attack there, but then you also proc in the block on like 5, which can get weird with Frostbolts and stuff.
Why are Norway at 19 right now? That's just my counterpoint.
It'll be fine.
All right.
A lot of this deck is Faith Soul. I love winding you up. I don't often wind you up. Apart from every time I open my mouth.
Yeah, literally always.
So Fallon's into Leroy, probably. Oh, that's rough. So can Diggen and Team Norway here actually, you know, get themselves out of this? Because, you know, they can sort the board out. They've got a Frost Nova, Antonidas Frost Nova.
I mean, also, crucial piece of information is that there is no ice block on the other side right now, and there is no ice block that has been drawn. That's something that we probably haven't made as clear as we should have done. That is an ice barrier that is in play for Israel, and crucially, Norway probably have that information because they know they gave Israel a 0 mana ice barrier, and it has just not been played. Why wouldn't it have been played by this point? There's no Antonidas in this deck. It's not like you're going to get Medivh synergy out of your 0
Maybe you want
mana
that
ice
wisp.
barrier.
Maybe you want the wisp.
Right. So
yeah, that is true. That is true, actually.
So they're almost certain that this is an ice barrier that's in play, but there it is. There is the ice block that actually makes a big, big difference because now it's going to be much tougher for Diggen and Norway to set up any kind of quick way to steal this win.
Yeah. I like how Frostbolts here is kind of annoying for Team Israel. Because Frostbolt's the bridge, I would say, between proccing a block at a reasonable amount. Because at the moment, there's Violence, Portal, Fireball, Pyroblast. None of those pieces go together because they're not glyphed, so they're not cheaper. So it's kind of awkward to get this block procced at a specific moment, which is maybe why he attacked in earlier to try and get the Alexstrasza attack in somehow. So because he could proc some of the ice barrier, if the Alexstrasza hits in, it could make the numbers a little bit easier, although the odds on Alexstrasza actually getting that attack through was always going to be pretty slim. Just going to go for the Violence Portal here.
Well, that's an issue. That is probably going to need to be dealt with before Diggen can think about any way to set up a win condition here, but he doesn't really have time to be hanging about clearing up Halazil while he's trying to set up a burn plan for himself. But with no second ice block in hand, he can't really set up an aggressive Alexstrasza push here because he'll just lose his block in one turn and then have no way to defend on the second. But he also knows that there is probably knows, we are theorizing that he knows there is no ice block in play for the opponent just yet. So does he think that maybe Alex just gets there in this spot?
Yeah, there's a slow option here where you could just say, you know, Frostbolt Doomsayer, get a draw with the Acolyte, or you could go into just Archmage, Frost Nova, get one Fireball and say, well, the healing doesn't matter from Halazil, you're still on full health, then go next turn if you want to try and pressure. But it is very difficult because you kind of do have to kill this Halazil off, or at least present the fact that you could kill it off, one way or the other, right? Because otherwise it means that Israel are just going to be sitting pretty, just doing whatever the hell they want.
I think Antonidas Nova is the play I like here, because it means if your opponent wants to dedicate their turn to popping your block, he attacks the barrier. Wow. That actually amazes me. But anyway, the Antonidas Frost Nova play here, if your opponent wants to spend his entire turn making sure this block gets popped, then great, you still have an Antonidas on the board. And if you need to defend yourself on the following turn because your opponent does all in your ice block, then you can defensive Alexstrasza and just use your board to trade into the Halazil.
Polymorph going to be nice here just to deal with this Antonidas and proc the block. Looks like Norway in a bit of a rough spot here. There is still Pyroblast. There is still Ice Blocks, not equipped, but available in the hand of Israel, so they are protected. Primordial Glyph can work some miracles.
Wow, the preemptive high fives are getting thrown out from Israel.
It. Confidence.
Yeah, they feel extremely comfortable with this board position, and who can blame them?
The armor.
There's an extra armor protecting them. Alexstrasza can't even really set up a win condition. A defensive Alexstrasza doesn't even really get them there because 8 mana Pyroblast plus Halazil plus ping makes 15 as well. All planned perfectly. They had the numbers laid out in their mind.
Even if this got more complicated for Glacier and Team Israel. They have Arcane Intellect. They have the Ooze just to drop down as like an annoyance because they've seen so much AoE this game. They have Meteor to deal with Alexstrasza easily without even a second thought. There's still so much left in the deck. I still don't think we've seen a Cabal Courier as well. That's left at least one. So they've got so much available that even if this doesn't take them a turn or two to win, they're probably still very comfortable. They're on 37 health.
You've got to go, Norway. He's digging as hard as he possibly can. Diggen is digging for an answer. He's not going to find it, though. Cabalist Tome does get him a secret, but not the right one. Woof. Norway give it up. Israel square up their record now. They square up their own record at one series to 1, and they square up their record with Norway, who themselves are 1 series to 1 as well. Really just reintroducing themselves back into the pack in that group and putting themselves back in contention to progress to our stage 2 round robin.
Yeah, and it was a pretty rough game for Norway overall, to be honest. And I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of people have been saying, is Discover Mage just now better than Freeze Mage? You know what I mean? Like, is this why everyone's playing it? Is it just better, or is Freeze Mage just different? But you know what I'm getting at, right? So
it sounded a touch patronizing, though. You're all special in your own little way.
No, different benefits of matchups and stuff like that. Yeah. So we do see how the overall series went down then. Israel, losing a couple in the middle there, but fighting back and able to take it to the ace match and get the win with the Discover Mage versus the Freeze Mage. And we saw, I was just going to say, we saw like how unhappy Diggen looked on camera there. He was definitely not enjoying that final game, at least.
Yeah, I have many questions about that last game. It was
we can ask some.
Very strange.
We can ask some now because I think we have Glacier on the line. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, well, first of all, congratulations on the series win. It went all the way to the ace match in a bit of a tense Discover Mage versus a Freeze Mage. How comfortable were you going into that last game knowing it was going to be at least a Mage mirror?
Extremely confident. I finished top 100 with the list last season, and I played over 200 or 300 games with it. So.
Okay. Seems you're getting close to my level of knowledge and skill with the deck, so
Raven,
I'm joking.
Just be quiet, Raven. When you found out that you were up against Freeze Mage and not Discover Mage Mirror, I saw you guys were watching the mulligans very, very carefully at the start, right?
Yeah,
trying to figure out what you were getting. So when you found out it was Freeze, did you feel better or worse about that matchup than playing the Mirror?
Extremely better. I think it's so against Medivh it's 50-50. Against Freeze Mage, I think it's at least 65% for me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And then going into this series overall versus Norway, was there anything you were particularly trying to counter that you thought they were going to play? We've talked a lot about Zyra's playing Rogue, for example. Is there anything you thought of in that, or was your preparation more general and just making sure you had a good lineup for yourselves?
I scouted every single player, and I scout a lot, every match for us, but in this format, you can't really try to counter them because you don't know against which player you're going to play.
Sure.
So it's more like going for an overall lineup that will fit best.
Okay, cool. So, I think that's going to be it from us. So congratulations again on the victory, guys. You deserved it. It was a cool series to watch and cast, and we'll see you next time, no doubt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So awesome to hear from those guys. They all look, you know, the camaraderie there is brilliant. Everyone in the background getting the waves in. The guy with the hat, I kind of want to steal that at some point, but might have to travel a fair bit to get there. We can see some of the highlights from this series, though. Wow, this feels like a long time ago now.
It really does, yeah.
Feels like a very, very long time ago.
It was a marathon series, but as you can see here, the combination of this Finger pull paired with the consecration that was mulliganed away and then drawn back into at the perfect moment meant that Israel had a quick blowout win over the 16-year-old Wunderkind from Norway.
Yeah, it was a pretty clear cut from here. It was very difficult for them to come back, but they did start to. Zokthar pulled one out the back here, I think, with the Taunt Warrior against the Jade Druid. Helped quite a lot by Israel's lack of a good card draw early on and lack of board building, but still Zokthar powered it pretty well, managed to get all the taunts out early enough, and then got that big brawl off. And again, saw the power of the Curator drawing the Direhorn Matriarch and the Primordial Drake into the hand, and then being the boss it is, surviving the brawl.
Yep, and they just took a little moment to pause and laugh at their opponent's expense before shooting the face for 8 damage, and that was the beginning of a snowball. This was a really interesting mid-game interaction where there were multiple options between True Silver, Harrison, Kodo, the ordering that you wanted to put them in. This could have been a big burn for Israel if they had hit Tyrion, even if they hit another Stonehill defender, honestly.
Oh,
like,
huge,
that is an amazingly high-value card for them to take away. It was just a Hydrologist in the end. This Kalamos turn looked like it could have been the turning point for them, but Diggen and Norway correctly responded and put themselves on the back foot, played defense for a little while, but then that perfectly timed push that we saw in the end with the final Tyrion just sacrificing it to the poison minion to set up lethal with the Ashbringer.
Yeah, it was kind of huge. As we sort of suggested early on, it was a very back and forth match overall here. With the both decks, both teams being able to do some big board clears and sort of wrestle for the board even into the late game. The Ungoro pack doing the heavy lifting, I would say, for Team Israel in this game specifically with the Thresher then there. But I think we start to see the beginning of the end here with the Pyro into the Consecrate, and then the Tyrion comes down later, as you said, to finish up this game.
Yeah, there was still a lot of legs left in this game at this point because you can see the hand size, but that hand size very quickly started to dwindle for Israel. The Elise pack cards were just dropped out one by one, and Paladin just had sufficient answers. Devolve into high main here was definitely a piece of bad luck, but that is a risk you take when you put Devolve in your deck. That kind of stuff can always happen to you. And then speaking of high mains, here's one of the most efficiently dealt with high mains you will ever see. 0 mana Hunter's Mark, trade a 1/3, and then value trade away the rest of the Hyenas.
Yeah, absolutely huge blowout game there against the Hunter. Priest is never one you want to queue into. The second they get those early removal or sort of, tricky spells to a certain extent with the Potion of Madness, it gets very, very difficult. But this
you
game...
can see, as Diggen here is just desperately trying to find an answer. On camera, the Israel team and Glazer are just saying, come on, it's over. Scoot, pack it up.
Get out of this game.
Yep.
The Earth from Glazer as well, he believes this matchup is, I would say, extremely favoured at 60-65.
It definitely is. 65 is a big claim.
Exactly.
65 is a huge number in terms of a matchup win rate, but I totally agree that the Discover Mage in that specific matchup is a big favourite.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of games under his belt, so feeling very confident in that one. We can check out how the groups line up now after Israel getting that win, and everything's just shaken up a little bit. Italy, of course, still on the top. Finland 1-1, Israel now 1-1, Japan 1-1, but then Norway going 1-2. But the game record is relatively close, so they're still looking okay in that extent. And Chile is 0-1, rocking at the bottom of the group there.
Yeah, my mistake. I said Norway were 1-1 after that series. Of course, they are 1-2, picking up the extra loss. So Israel actually above them in the standings, leapfrogging Norway after that victory and putting themselves right in contention, tied with Finland for the best game score of all of those players who are 1-1. So they are right in the mix in that group now. Very important win for them because we pointed out these countries that are 0-2 now, the Romanias, the Germanys, they have everything to do. Yep. Israel did not want to be in that spot, put in the performance when it counted.
Yeah, really cool long series for the first series of the day. A lot of cool stuff going on. Again, just more great decks to see. We're going to go to a very short break while we prepare the second series, guys. This is Hearthstone Global Games. Don't go anywhere.
We're almost there. Quiet down, everyone. This is not like any of our previous expeditions. This will be far more ambitious. We're stepping into a land of primordial wonder. Infused with astonishing elemental energies. The plant life here holds very unusual properties. So don't touch anything. And while you may be excited to see the local fauna, you might want to make sure they don't see you. Because their powers of adaptation are devastating. Make no mistake, we will be tested at every turn. But if we stay on our guard, we might just survive. Now then, are you ready? Then let's journey into Ongoro Crater.